get to double. So there's just.
Will is gonna be late to the meeting because traffic is gone.
audio. So I'm sure people are saying, we have audio. But it is picking up, now it's picking up. Whatever you did, I have sound now.
Okay.
Let me look at the screen. Oh, hold on.
We have to
Oh,
replace
so yeah, we
it.
do want to be able to see him and.
You can replace your phone. You need to know that. That's okay.
See what I put down up there.
Go back now, wait. No. Go for the. You don't need a laptop.
Oh.
We have a magic device.
Everyone else see documents.
Let me know.
Nice.
Tricky
So can you project? the-
That's fair.
No, you don't need
Can you
that.
project? the-
I actually love it. So I don't know
Oh, you need-
Then I got.
Troy.
That's right.
Did the audio go to the?
Yeah.
This is a good show. Actually, that's a good one.
I only hear you.
Thank you. That was really helpful and necessary.
Oh, it's gonna really be back to my transcript. That means everything in the transcript will say Troy Hilbert.
Oh.
That's okay. I can figure it out. But that's good for me to know. Would you prefer not to do it? No, it's great. I'm excited. Okay. New toy, right? I can figure out, people have certain like vernacular that's on here.
Maybe it'll be in your house at night.
Exactly, that sounds good.
Like the hiding of bedroom. Hi.
Okay, I'm ready.
You're prepared. I don't even go to school. I'm Indian.
I'll see that.
It was actually, I will call us to order at 6:06.
For the June, May regular meeting. And Sarah can do roll call.
Andrade,
Present.
Serena Prado. Present. It's coming.
Jackie's here.
Oh, you're here. Sorry, it's like Cresswell. Here, Wilbrams.
Sure.
Yeah, Kerr. Present. Land.
Here.
She's coming.
She will be.
Here, Martinsek. She was in computer issues. Is Ellen back in yet? Ellen, can you talk?
Here, can you hear me?
Yeah, great, awesome. Menjivar,
Present.
Powers,
Here.
Zen. Here. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Roberto seconds.
Is there any amendments? Are you guys gonna?
I have, no. I'd like to add something to the agenda. Okay. Turn that out. Okay, I received a copy from somebody else here that the CIWP has to be voted on by June 10th, or we has to be approved by June 10th. And we did not get that as part of our state of the school address last month. And so I wanted to add that, a discussion about that, about what the plan is going to be to today's meeting.
Okay, I'll add that.
Where do you want to add it?
Let's do it after new business A. Or actually, we can do it after the approvals.
After what?
After the approvals, new
Okay.
business.
Okay, so I make a motion to amend the agenda to add a CIWP discussion, after budget items.
Sarah, I'd like to recognize Lane with joining us now.
Do you have a second for that amendment?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, I vote, I'll do a roll call vote for the amendment, amended agenda. Andrade?
Yay.
Clancy?
Yay.
Prado? Yay. Cresswell?
Yay.
Hilbrand?
Yay.
Kerr? Yay. Land? Yes. Maha Yes. Ma, yes. Martinez?
Yes.
Twenty twenty-two LSC regular and closed meeting minutes. We'll do a quick roll call. Andrade?
Yay.
Clancy?
Yay.
Prado? Here. Cresswell?
Yay.
Hilbrand?
Yay.
Kerr? Okay, no, yeah, Ms. Kerr?
Oh, yeah.
Land?
Yes.
Manal
Yeah.
Ma, yeah. Martinez?
Yeah.
Okay, Towers?
Here. Yes.
Sorry, Menjivar?
Yes.
Zen?
Yes.
I threw you out, I did it out of order, sorry about that. Okay, I make another motion to approve the minutes from the April 26, 2022 LSE special and closed meeting minutes. Second,
I'll second.
vote Andrade,
Yay.
Clancy,
Yay.
Prado,
Yay.
Cresswell,
Yay.
Hilbrand,
Yay.
Kerr,
Yay.
Land, Manal Staying. Ma, yes, Martinsek,
Yes.
Menjivar,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay, last one, I make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 6, 2022 LSE emergency meeting.
Second.
Okay, I'll second. Andrade,
Yay.
Clancy,
Yay.
Prado, Stan Cresswell,
Yay.
Hilbrand,
Yay.
Kerr,
Oh, yeah.
Land,
Abstain.
Manal Hoppenworth, Ma, yay, Martinsek,
Yes.
Jafar.
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Abstain.
Okay, those are all approved, and I turn it back to you.
Okay, so we do not have anyone signed up online for public participation. Is there anyone here for public participation? Okay, so we will go right into new business, which is another discussion of fiscal year 2023 budget. And you want to project?
Yeah, I just am not sure if the stream can hear. They should be able
Oh,
to.
no.
They can and they couldn't, they can and they can't, but I think, they're okay. Let me just do a little check. Let me. It should be, the audio is coming through my system, so maybe it was just when you were beginning. Yeah, present. Let me find that file. Mr. Bernie's here. So, gonna.
There it is, really. This one gets broken. One on the agenda.
I closed that one. I go, sound is back, everyone says sounds good.
Oh, I think it's because YouTube is blocked on the back.
You can't watch it here.
Oh, so you can't.
It is forbidden.
Please see my earlier question, please define CIWP as yes. CIWP discussion has been added. Sorry, everyone. Okay, present. Oh, can you see it?
It used to go up.
No.
No.
So what's up there a minute ago?
Usually headphones are like snaps. Oh, what is here? Okay.
Hi, Miss Martinsec, and people at home. We're fixing it real quick. Sorry about that.
Okay. I don't think I said anything that exciting, so I just started the student fees. They're assessed to our non-waiver students. The students are encouraged to fill out this family income information form. Actually, everyone has to fill it out regardless of your status. And you fill that out before you pay any system. The FAQs are done, but I just put some few just reminders. If you can't pay fees, students will not be denied participation. They should reach out to the business manager and the admin. Graduation fees vary year to year. Those are assessed to all non-waiver students. And then just a review of, these are our current fees. We have a general fee of $400, which pays for a yearbook personnel. You see the items listed there. Tech fee of $100, which could be software, projectors, maintenance, digital tech. Previously this year, Chromebooks, but CPS really had to pay for almost all of our new Chromebooks. PE kit is for freshmen only. And then there's different fees, class fees and athletic fees, and these are fees that would go into activity accounts. So if you're taking an aquatics class, that fee pays for that. Various replacement items. I listed here Mr. Bernie's spreadsheet. I don't think, I'm gonna go through and then we'll get into the details. One thing that I just put on here, some things that, to make sure that we don't forget about, is this capstone potentially needing a department budget. And then this idea of having a theater manager, for lack of a better word, someone to maintain, make sure that that one. These are estimates of projected income, based on what Mr. Voigt had shared with us as far as the amount of students that are paying. So, you know, you can count on potentially $839,000 in fees, and that helps to fund our, helps to fund all of our internal accounts. This is rental income, I think, from this year. I mean, Troy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We just got that kick soccer, and then there was 4,000 in here. I don't know what that was from something earlier this year, but.
Yeah, it's pretty close. The iguanas were the, yeah.
So this usually was between 250 to 500,000, so that 8,000 is a lot less. And maybe Troy can give some updates now or later about where you think, if we have any projected income for next year. I don't know if you even know that.
We're just getting started with the rentals. They just opened up April 19th. So a lot of groups have reached out though. So I've been flooded with a lot of requests. So it looks like it's going to be pretty good. But dollar amounts,
Right.
no idea.
It's just something to keep in mind that we don't have a solid amount, but hoping that increases. This is just a kind of a snapshot of how the fees have historically been distributed. So the top bar is the $400 fee per student. 57% of that has been going to departments. And I'll share a spreadsheet where we can break down and you can see. Technology is new this year, and then we will have to pay for just one position this time, the operations manager. And this is kind of like all over the place, but to give you an overview, and then we'll have Mr. Bernie go into detail. So Sandy Soria worked very closely with the technology team, and then reached out to other teachers to put together a plan and look at everything in the building so we know what we need to budget for. The key areas of focus were hardware and software. What wasn't covered was networking, that's all covered by CPS. And TBD was still like smart boards and other things, because our biggest concern were hardware. Right now, our funding sources have historically been, for this year, $25,000 out of the Jones budget, and that's a percent of the $400 fee that all the students pay. Then there was this new tech fee, which is $100 per student. So that was approximately $135,000. Year to date, I think we collected $110,000. It might be a little bit more by now. And so this was just like to see like how much income we have for tech. And I know this is really small, and you guys see that on your screen. This is about Chromebooks. The 3180s, they just extended that life by another year, but we do have some expiring. Sandy put this together before CPS announced that they would be funding Chromebooks. We still don't know what that number is, at least I don't, unless you guys have more knowledge. So that was his main focus, is making sure like that we have enough Chromebooks for all the students in the school. And he was looking at funding for that. But now that we don't have to spend our own money on that, he's shifted to replacing like out-of-date computers. So that's what this slide is. He looked at purchasing and leasing. So he reached out to a CPS-approved Prom and talked to people that had worked at the school district, the Ball Chatham School District, that had worked with this company and with good reviews. And so we can lease for a 3-year lease 3 computer labs. He's suggesting 3011, 306, and 3030C / library.
This one.
There it is. And for let's just say $50,000. And so after the 3-year term, we can continue a new lease and get all new equipment, or we can, it's like a rent to own. You can use some of that and you can just buy it. The way the tech changes so quickly, I think 3 years is probably a decent lifespan for that, and would allow us to just have state of the art tech. And I think the teachers are kind of on board. I don't want to speak for them, but I think they're on board with just having something that works. And so if it's through leasing, if it saves us a little bit more money. My question to Sandeep was, what about these other labs? Then are we looking at what's our largest per year? What is he projecting? And so if you look, the Apple desktops, those were purchased by Friends of funds. They're almost expiring 2023, 2025. So thinking about like either using some of the tech fee to replace those, since those we can't lease, or working with Brenda Jones to plan for that as we'll know that that's an expense. So this was his general, the overall budget. This, again, the $120,000. The Chromebooks is no longer hopefully needed. We'll need some for maintenance. Ms. Troche does Frankenstein a lot of things, savvy, but sometimes you need some Frankenstein. And then additionally, he has this whole, and I shared it, I think, in the drive, but he has a whole list of like every teacher in different departments and what he talked to them, what they wanted, what was good and what wasn't good. And so he has a very comprehensive plan. I didn't put it all in this slide. So for technology, this is kind of put this together. In the general fee, 11% of that goes to software. So that's about $58,000. That's what we had in there right now. And if we had tech fees and then the IT department budget, which is also funded by the $400 fee, that would give us about $200,000 a year. So the lease, software, IT budget, then we could have potentially $68,000 still that we could start using to replace teacher tech, projectors, or start saving for that Apple computer. So it's just, I know we had some discussions about reducing the tech fee, but I don't think we're there yet. And that would be my recommendation, is that there's still a lot of tech in the building that needs to be evaluated before we reduce that amount. So now I want to share your spreadsheet, Mr. Gray.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is this an appropriate time for questions? Or?
Sure.
Cool. So, I saw on the spreadsheet that something that looked like it was saying we're reducing the number of computers in the library, and we're cutting that from 30 to 10. So we're not adding more Chromebooks. We're just relying on the Chromebooks that students have been given at one point. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. You would know if we received that 30 there, but it was, Mr. Feely slided that, or just recommended that they didn't need to replace 30, they just needed to replace 10 just to have. Let me share this.
That's not linked on the agenda, is it though?
No, I don't think Mr. Brady's opened this up for like,
No, I had not. I felt it, I think we were sharing it with Dr. Powers at the time.
yeah, so.
You didn't share with me, did you?
No, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it might be ready to share one more.
Oh, right.
I can zoom in.
Where is this document?
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Brady's drive.
Yes.
Um,
I'm not able to see what's on that.
oh, well, I'm sharing it.
So, yeah.
I don't have that.
You have- Here, computer large enough for your computer? I share it with four of us.
Let me see if I can just share it.
You should have it in your email.
It's in a page.
Go back to the. Not the photo. Yeah, yeah.
So I can make it bigger over here.
They also shared the border, can you see it?
That was view only, correct? It's fine.
I'll edit anything.
Please.
It'll be fine. Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All right, as Sarah mentioned, we are taking a slightly different approach to budgeting in the sense of we're moving away from unrealized funds. Because remember, I think we spoke last time about funds gradually coming in during different times throughout the school year. So for example, if science, and I'm just throwing science, well, let's choose science. If we look here, science is row 15. If you see, whoa, all right. If you see in column E, the allocation was $16,000. But we may not have that $16,000 when school opens because we haven't collected all of the fees, as Sarah mentioned, that funds all of the departmental funding. So what we've done is taken a percentage way of allocating the money. For example, of the 500 and was it 40, $552,000 that we are projected to collect, and that's assuming every student will pay that by the end of the school year. 57% goes to the departments, as Ms. Mom mentioned. Science would get a percentage of that. So as I collect, say, for an example, in October, we get $200,000. I would divvy that using this formula. I would punch in $200,000. If we scroll down here, a little more, all the way down to, yes, this amount. So I would simply just punch in 200,000 here and it will change the allocations. I would allocate those dollars and we would do this every time there's a distribution. So we're working with more realistic monies rather than projected monies. And sometimes it confuses people because they will think, we had 16,000, where did it go? Well, we never really got all of the 16,000 yet. So this is a more realistic viewpoint. It's the same allocations. We're still going to give this, we copied basically the same formula that was used in last year's approval because it worked. The allocations worked. We're just realizing them differently. So that being said, how this reads, basically at the top, column A, is just basically all of your departments listed at the top there. I think Sarah went over the percentages in column B, which add up to 100% between textbooks, special projects, departmental needs, blah, blah, blah. These are the percentages, for example, of this 7% here, and I'm pointing like a teacher because I've always wanted to be one. Of this 7% of the total funds collected from this 552, 7% goes towards textbooks. Within that, these percentages are broken down here from the 7. So in this example, almost 54% goes to this lovely acronym, and vice versa, and everything else sort of trickles down. Each category is done that way. This column D basically is the disbursement amount. Yes. So that's the amount when you, again, change this number, it's going to tell you how much to disperse to each account based on these percentages. This was just, again, column E just gives us some historical information on what we actually allocated this year. And if you can scroll up, Sarah, if you don't mind.
This one's actually me, which
Oh,
one?
sorry,
Oh, okay. I was-
Troy.
But
that's
they
fine.
wouldn't want to see it online too. So where do you want to go?
No, just to the top of the sheet, that's all.
I'll just do it.
Sorry. Basically, if you see what was allocated here at the very top, dance, we allocated $9,000. Using this formula, we're pretty much dead on with $9,061. And the sheet trickles down 13, 13, 13. You'll see that same pattern. So we're sort of spot on with our percentages and allocations. This last column, which doesn't seem to be populating, but it's basically a formula just saying, hey, of the allocated money, how much have we expended? And anything less than 70%, meaning that we haven't really spent as much, there may be room for adjustment. We're now into, these numbers are from April 15th. So there's still almost 2 months of school left, roughly. And there are a lot of expenses that do occur. However, we can start identifying some of those different areas where the spending may be low, for whatever reason. And we can reallocate that should we need to. If we could scroll back over to the far left, that first column A. Just want to explain that a little bit. This is something that's a little different, and I've spoken to a few teachers regarding the sub-accounts and their normal accounts, and I'll just call it that. And Sarah touched on it a little bit. For example, at the top, you'll see dance, but then below that, you'll see in blue these sub-accounts, basically. And what these sub-accounts, as Sarah mentioned earlier, are the activity accounts for those disciplines that require more because they have more consumables or whatever it is. They're replacing things more often. They require a little more money than what was originally allocated for whatever reason. So you'll see dance. There's a lot of things that they do a lot in dance, apparently. I'm not a dancer. I'm just taking their word for it. But in that sense, the original allocation for dance, which is 2.88% of the total amount, this dance activity and class fee, these are sort of the same thing, honestly. They will backfill or supplement whatever is not, for example, here, there was about $2,000 difference as of April 15th in what was allocated versus what was spent. There may be $4,000 worth of expenses still to do with dance, which we would fall short. So that's when we would utilize these sub-accounts to fill and supplement what we had fallen short with in the normal accounts. And this goes all the way down this way. Are there any questions? Doing a lot of talking.
So the sub-accounts are directly tied to the extra student fees for students who are participating in that class or that activity.
Absolutely. It is not a general fee. That's why it's in blue. It's not part, and it's not taken from the actual $400 student fee at all. It is a separate cost, a supplemental cost, an activity fee.
How do we know if those are there if students don't pay their fees right away? How do we supplement it?
That's a fantastic question, and that's why we're budgeting this way. So again, we don't know, and that leads, great segue to the next part. With activity fees, we don't know the schedule yet at this point. So it's hard to determine how many students are going to actually take AP Chem or whatever it is that activity fee is going towards. We don't know that. We don't have the schedule done yet. So those are sort of unknown, but luckily we try to keep reserves. And as Sarah mentioned, these funds roll over. Unlike the SBB funds or budgeted funds that are in Oracle, and Oracle are the funds that we get from CPS. We're talking strictly our checking account money in IBES, or Fund 124, it's the same thing. Those funds in 124 or our checking account are not wiped every year. The budgeted funds from CPS get wiped, and that's been a tricky point for a lot of people because they seem to think right now a lot of department chairs are coming, hey, we have to spend this money, as if it's going to go away. And that's not the case. We will be able to roll those funds over. Budgeted funds in Oracle, yes, those do get wiped. We have to spend those. So I just want to make that point of clarification. They will roll over. And sometimes in rolling over, it provides cushion for the upcoming year. When funds haven't been realized, to your point, what if we fall short? We don't have the supplemental funds. We don't have all of this. We'll have some of the rollover funds per department to maintain and retain, to help fund the beginning of the school year.
Mr. Bernie, you mentioned that the supplemental funds are not included in the general fee of $400. But I thought that every year when we get this document of like the fees that families are supposed to pay, I thought there was a separate section for activity fees. Like if you're taking an AP class, you'll pay for this. If you're going to be participating in an athletic sport, you may pay this amount. Are you indicating those supplemental fees are not included in that section?
No, the $400 is strictly for the departmental funds. And the supplemental, it's usually $40 that they pay extra depending on the schedule or what they're taking. Maybe I'm not understanding your question clearly.
Yeah, so every year we get or like in August before the start of the school year, families will get a notice about like, here are the fees that all families are going to be paying unless you qualify for a waiver.
Right.
And it'll show the general fee, $100. It'll show the technology fee, $100. And then there's a third section that'll show activity fees.
Correct.
So like, for example, visual arts might be $40. So I'm trying to figure out if the dance fee, these supplemental fees are included in that third section.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Absolutely. That is what it's a part of. And everything that was in blue on that spreadsheet is sort of noted that way. You guys have a copy of it, and you can look at it with a little more detail if needed. But you're absolutely right. That is part of that bottom section. Depending on that student's scheduling, they may have to pay that additional activity.
Right.
You're absolutely correct. I'm sorry.
And then my understanding, according to CPS policy, all student fees that are collected that year have to be spent that year for that child. That's mine. So like, for example, if the school collects $400 plus whatever the activity fees and for the school year 2022 to 2023, those fees must be maximized and spent within that school year because it basically for those students that are attending that year. And they can't be used, my understanding is they can't be used to be saved for future projects.
That has not been the case. And I'll be very transparent and realistic about that. There are times when, and when schools don't have, they'll be buying paper clips forever just to spend money on frivolous things. And that's a waste of money. There are some schools that are unfortunately don't have resources as plentiful as Jones, and really need to do that, need to save from year to year because they have no idea what they're going to get. That may be an old rule, and I don't know if it's, I've never had to abide by that in any school that I've worked at. Only with budgeted funds do they say, that has to be used or not. Because what would we do with the money? Where would it go? If we did not spend, if we had $500,000 left in general, where would it go?
Right, and I guess the logic behind that is like it's supposed to serve, so it's a family, like as a parent who has a student here, if I'm getting that $500, supposed to serve my child and the children that are, or the students that are currently at Jones, and not for future students.
No, and I understand that concept, and maybe this is the time when we take a look at that. And I understand what you're saying, but every school is like this. I guarantee you, every school does not spend their checking account funds down to the penny and start off with zero at the beginning of the year. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I agree, I'm not suggesting you spend down to the penny, I'm just suggesting that we're not holding on to.
No, this is not a savings account, and I want to be very clear. That is not the purpose of this. We're in difficult times, and we need to be resourceful. That's why we did make some of the financial moves that we made, and that was approved last meeting to retain some of these funds because they will be used for entire school use. Department funds, will stay in departments. There's no need to roll this and wipe departments of their funding to have funds just sitting in a pot for savings. Let's utilize these funds and push them back. I totally understand what you're saying. And maybe in some cases, student fees, and not saying that about Jones, but maybe student fees have been over-realized or not distributed properly and not utilized properly. I'm not saying that happened here at all. I think we've done a very good job at it, but I do understand your point with utilizing the funds in the current year, but it's really an unrealistic practice, quite honestly. Even there was a time when they would say all of the club accounts, everything, if you don't spend it, we roll it up all into general funds. And it just sits there. And then you end up transferring or giving these people seed money to buy books or to buy the clubs to do their activities because we start them off with $0 at the beginning of the year. So it's not really the best practice and it's not very realistic, but there's not one school that zeroes out that I'm aware of in that way.
I was just gonna add that also due to the cash flow situation of how fees are collected, the fees from,
It's a great point.
the fees from the previous year can fill those budget line items at the beginning of the year. So it's almost like you're getting the benefit, but you're getting, like your freshmen are getting benefit from students that have graduated and have already paid. The other thing that I think that it is important to, annually to make sure that there isn't a big savings amount so that you can look at your fees realistically and say, we have this extra amount, we didn't use it, we need to cut fees, or is there a special project, a facility project, or something that we've been really waiting to do? Let's utilize that money. And that's what I'd like to see in the future. I see future LSC member here. to look at that and on a monthly basis or like quarterly basis to say, okay, what did we spend? What do we need to do? And let's make a plan.
And one last thing to add to that point, we're in a very busy time right now financially because seniors are paying all of their fees. And I'm having very difficult conversations with parents and students alike regarding fees that have not been paid since freshman year. So to your point, Sarah, that happens quite often where we don't realize fees in that current year, but they're paying fees now that are 4 years old. 4 years old, we're getting monies from just now. So, you know, it's really, it's a difficult situation financially to balance when you have that delay in realizing funds, but that's why I'd like to sort of adopt at least this percentage model. So we're working with the monies that we actually have in hand rather than projected or anticipated funds that we may not realize for 3 or 4 years later when the student decides to pay their fees.
Ellen. Yes, Ellen.
Sure. I actually built up a couple questions. Sorry. So my first question was just a clarification. I think Mr. Burney, you just said this, that the blue line budgets, those are supplemental to like a departmental budget's like percentage of the internal accounts. Just verifying.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then I have a question about purchasing books. So I know I saw at the bottom of the spreadsheet, there's books that are listed. And so, and also like subscriptions and things like that that are needed for the beginning of next school year. Are we purchasing books now from this year's funds? Are these books being purchased from next year's budgeted funds? And is there a time frame? I guess that's a lot of question.
If I can, that is for this is all for next school year. And that's why we are sort of soliciting departments for any quotes so we can get a head start on at least gathering this information. So when the budgets load, I'm able to get all these materials in prior to the beginning of school and getting everything asset tagged and all the books labeled. That's a daunting task.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get in front of that, that would be the best. So yes, but this is for next year.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to clarify that. So that means that like starting July 1st is when this could start to, be purchased.
And if I could add, in the past, especially when we've had a little bit more of a cushion, if we were projecting a purchase for new text or materials like that for the next year, if we had funds available still during the current fiscal year, then we could purchase, essentially using this year's money for next year's purchase, which also gets the ball rolling in terms of getting the delivery and so forth. We're just not quite in that situation right now, but we have been in the past.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to ask because I think some teachers are just wondering what the time frame is. So I appreciate that clarification. And thank you for this super clear delineation of everything.
Mr. Burnett, for purchase orders supposed to be given by June 10th.
You're fantastic. Purchase orders. So there's a difference between purchase orders, which is generated through the Oracle system, versus our checks that we write. We do a lot of check writing here, more than I've ever been in school. But most of our funding comes from our checking account, so it makes sense. That being said, there are some things that we cannot write a check for, that we have to transfer the funds, and you guys approve a lot of those things that we do book transfers, so we can do a purchase order for a certain dollar amount. That deadline for purchase orders.
What is a purchase order?
Wonderful question. It is simply a promissory note to the vendor saying we would like to order these items. Here is our commitment and legal document saying that we will pay for this. We have, procured your services or goods. This is guaranteeing you payment once you have either delivered or completed the deeds or service, whatever that is. Then they will be paid. But a lot of companies require a purchase order. Great question. So purchase orders, the dates. purchase orders, and we need to have those in the system by May 25th. The cutoff date for me is May 27th. I want to have at least 2 days to go through our approval system here internally. So we don't have a lot of time. This happens every year. It's nothing unique this year, but May 25th for teachers, departments to get in orders to me, please, so I can process them. And again, if we're going to write checks, some of these things we can write checks for. We don't have that deadline. I can write checks year round. That doesn't stop. Since most of our budgeted funds come from our checking account, that deadline is not as urgent as it would be for some other schools. Unless it's a large amount, meaning that we're spending over $10,000, but it could be the case where we've already spent $8,000 with this vendor throughout the year, and we only have $2,000, and you have a $5,000 order. So we would need to do some adjustments. So that being said, yes, please get your orders in.
Totally understand. It's not a one-to-one, your family pays the fee and then they get all of the feedback in some way immediately. But just looking at the red cells, so for students, like I'm looking at rows 62 and 63, which is test prep and like college counseling. And so there's like a lot of money allocated for that, and then none was spent. And like the test prep in particular is like a service that's kind of time sensitive for students who are. So I'm just wondering, like in that case, like what happened, I guess, because yeah.
Test prep, if you remember, we just had that. We actually were able to fund that through not internal accounts, but through our NFT funds, I believe. That's
Yes.
correct. So we were blessed with that this year. So that's why that's a big fat zero, because we didn't have to use any of those funds.
And then for the college counseling, I was also wondering if that's similar.
Yeah, and again, I'm coming in mid-year, quite honestly, and I'm not sure what their needs were besides, office supplies here and there, but I could not find a lot of spending. And the way things are structured now, it's sort of hard to extract certain spendings. And I'm probably going to make that a little easier for me to do next year. But it doesn't mean they didn't spend anything. I just couldn't. It's really, I'd have to go through a lot of orders, quite honestly, to see if that was tied to counseling. It's not that they didn't use it all. I just couldn't honestly find how much they used.
I have one more question. I'm just looking at the zero percentages, I guess, because those seem to be the most important to talk about. Which is like the student handbook. Was that also paid for with MFT, or was that?
That wasn't purchased at all this year. It will be for next year.
Got it. Thank you. Right, Mr. Hudson.
So maybe just to make sure I'm understanding, the funds that unspent are remaining in these sub-accounts for the next year, right?
Correct.
And then, sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. And then sort of a follow-up, some of them have quite a bit left over. I'm looking at the sports team fee, which is $30,000 allocated, $225 spent. Can that money later be used to help pay for other fees like the technology fee, which is quite
Not at
sizable?
all.
Okay.
So let me go back a little bit. There are a ton. This is the busiest time for spring sports. So I'm scheduled to transfer this to the actual athletic account because we're down to zero at this point. So I still have an ATR, sports trainers to pay for, which is a pretty heavy fare. All of our transportation, entry fees, referees for all these non-conference competitions. So most of that will be eaten up, quite honestly, very soon. But whatever is left over will remain in athletics.
Cool, thank you.
I just had a comment. So to Rachel's comment about counseling and college fairs for new members, that was a priority of the council last spring because they felt that college counseling was lacking for students. I don't have that many more details, but if we look at line item, why is it different? There's another counseling line. They have their own budget. Counseling. Okay, so I want to talk about this a little bit because counseling also has their own department budget,
Correct.
which keeps bringing me to sports teams. Oh, there it is 24. They've only used 26% of that. I'm not sure if they have more coming out. But additionally, in the MFT plan, there was a whole counseling department section. It was a little less than 20 grand that they were going to do all this stuff, MTSS, et cetera. None of that was done. And so my question for Dr. Powers is it the counseling department didn't have enough staff, or they were just overwhelmed this year, or do we need to have a separate college counseling person? Like, I just feel like that is an area of improvement that we were, as a council last spring, trying to focus on, and I feel like we missed it this year. So is there a plan for next year, or is the counseling department overwhelmed? Some of this came out, we talked about college counseling as a council during the principal evaluation. I think I could say that at least, and just felt like some students didn't feel supported.
Okay. Well, that's something that needs to be taken up with the counseling program itself. I don't know that I would say that they are overwhelmed. We are staffed pretty much along the lines that you would have in terms of proportions and ratios and so forth. And their focus is, obviously spread out over a number of issues because we have generalist college counselors, meaning that they are dealing with all the things that involve our kids from grades 9 through 12, and that they stay with their cohort of students during that time period, as long as those people are still here. Then as a result, they're dealing with scheduling. They're dealing with, so many other things involving personal counseling and personal issues and so forth. So college counseling is part of that. And it grows, obviously, as it gets closer to the senior year. Starts off slowly with 9th and 10th, becomes much more intense in 11 and 12. So yeah, it's, as far as the, amount of time and effort that goes into it, it's pretty significant. I don't know, how serious any deficits might be. And as far as the funds that were set aside, if they did not see any, specific need to add anything, in other words, if something could have been done within the scope of their current budget and within the scope of the school year, perhaps there weren't the need for some of those purchases or some of those additional services. Those were figures that were, put in without any particular funds tied to them, except for the MFT area. And again, it seemed like they accomplished what they were trying to accomplish without tapping into too much of those funds.
So this is something that our former parent representative Elaine Buggs and student representative Denai and I really advocated for this. And I think Daniel also was pushing hard for college counseling because it seemed like this is a real strong area that this is a good area where Jones needs to, I think, improve. And I know speaking for the parents who are part of the Latina, Hispanic community, they do feel like they're not getting that same level of support through the college process. And I understand that the counseling corner and the counseling department are doing a lot, managing students, academics here, their social emotional. This year they did a lot of virtual college tours. I believe they organized that, but it seems like there needs to be a better collaboration or coordination between the counseling department and maybe the administration and the testing coordinator to make sure that students are being supported throughout the entire college counseling process, especially our students who are coming from communities with limited resources or
who are first generation students who are endeavoring on this daunting task. It is an overwhelming task, and I believe the Friends of Jones they've also started some sort of program this year to try to work with students in college counseling. And Michelle, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was something that Patrice MacArthur was working on. So there is a need there, is basically what I'm saying. And I think there just needs to be more of an emphasis on providing those support services for students who students need that additional support through the college process.
There wasn't any funds given this year from FOJ. In answer to your question, there were some identified outside or services that people could go to and use that Latrice was able to help facilitate through outside of Jones. Last year we gave some money for actually college like testing and stuff, but this year we did approach the counselors to see if they needed anything, and we couldn't figure out, there wasn't a way to administer it. And so it's on their to-do for next year to see if there was something that they needed or we could help support.
I think having I'm sorry, I think having a systematic approach, like a whole school approach is important, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people doing various parts.
Right, and that's what we talked about with them, because my counsel to them was, you can't have one-offs, nor is it FOJ's place to decide who should and who should not get granted these dollars. And so we aren't in the business of passing out dollars to individuals based on needs. And so there would have to be a systematic way that the school would approach that. And so we said to the counseling department that if that's something you're interested in, take it up, come up with it. And then if you need funds, come back and FOJ can help underwrite if needed. That's where we left that conversation.
I mean, I guess I'll just add, like, moving forward, does it make sense to allocate like $25,000 if like none of it got spent, or if there's not like a specific thing that the counseling department says that they need? That's like a question that I have, because that's like, I mean, I know it's like kind of chump change in the grand scheme of things, but with the test prep too, I mean, obviously like that, you've already explained that, like is coming through, but yeah, that's just kind of my question. If there's not like a specific thing that they want to spend it on right now, then.
So I can tell you one of the needs that did come up in that conversation, just for you all to think about, was and this is how we got involved. There are application fees that people have to spend quite a bit of money on. And there are students that are not applying because they cannot afford the application fees. And so that is something that if there was a way that if it's for people who don't qualify for waivers. If you qualify for a waiver, everyone kind of knows, but there's a population that doesn't qualify for waivers, that it's a hardship financially for them to fill out these multiple applications with fees. And so that's the very specific conversation Latrice was having with the counseling department. How can that population be better supported so that it opens up more opportunities to them and allows maybe first generation who've never gone through it and others to be able to have the support that they need. Yeah.
Thanks. That's really helpful to know. I mean, my kid is graduating this year. She's excited to go to Northwestern. You know, I will say that she was accepted to a couple different schools. I feel like she did really well here at Jones, but I said, did you take advantage of any of the, college prep counseling? And she said, no. I just felt like those counselors, they weren't for me. They work for like somebody else, like emotional learning and that kind of thing. So I feel like she kind of was left on her own to do her own thing. But in terms of the fees, that's like something that needs to be started freshman year, no? Like you can't just pop that in.
So that's what ended up happening is, so it got brought to our attention and it was already past, like it was kind of past the date already. Was like due that weekend. And so there was no way to be able to, like we talked about, and then how do you administer it? And again, FOJ we did not want to know Pearson, like made people come to us to ask because of personal hardships. And so there was a logistical, of like, how can that group counselors be able to, because then there was some crossover and concern because CPS through rules, they can't, like, there was something that they got concerned with how they can actually underwrite individuals without, so it is a bigger issue that I'm like skimming the surface and don't have knowledge. I don't want to misspeak, but it is, I think, an opportunity for Jones to help building better community, to look at, is there a way that we can do this as an organization, as either through FOJ or through the school budgeting process?
Yeah, I mean, it's in our name, no?
Pardon?
It's in our name.
Excellent, yeah, that's right, that's right. So again, I don't have a solution, we didn't come up with a solution, but I would throw that out as one that I think FOJ would be very interested in working with Jones, and however we can help support that, we'd be open to that. Yeah, sorry.
So your goal, if I'm hearing right, like what your dream, I guess, solution would be like the counseling department request a certain amount of dollars and you give that and they divvy that up amongst individuals?
Yeah, exactly. But the question that came up again was through some of the, again, and I don't know CPS rules as deeply, but there was a concern because of how they can't write a check like to there was something that there was a concern about individual giving dollars to a kid through the school, like in a way.
Like giving money is different than like a fee waiver.
Correct. Well, and because the fee waiver, it's not through CPS, it's to the institution, the college institution. So imagine like you need like a credit card to plug in. So there was, again, lots of logistical, but I think there's an opportunity to better support.
Ellen, do you want to go?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, feedback, are we good? Okay, I just wanted to say, I think I definitely recognize and hear needs for additional supports in various areas. I actually just pulled up the MFT plan that was shared with us in November, and I'm seeing a lot of things with check marks by them that I'm not really sure what the actual plan was or how we know if we did it. I do want to just like note that at Jones in particular, the role of the counseling department is very broad, probably too broad. And so adding the expectation of developing additional programming, I think that's something that requires more of the like administrative like leadership in formulating that so that it can then be implemented. Thanks, Sarah, for dropping that in the chat. So I wanted to put that perspective out there that like currently I believe from my perspective as a teacher, again, I'm not in the counseling department, but their role is very broad. And so if there's additional asks, I think having structures in place with like clear benchmarks is easier to step into than here's a goal, but like no structures, which is a little bit what the MFT plan looks like to me.
Thanks, Ellen. Alexandra?
Have we ever considered the possibility, like when hiring positions, to hire someone who's a counselor with a specific role of like college counseling? Is that something we've like talked about? Because I definitely think emotional, like social emotional growth and college counseling require not a different skill set necessarily, but you need to be looking at a different facet of a person to succeed in that role. So is that something we've considered doing?
Well, in terms of our hiring for counselors, we've always looked to people who could fulfill all those responsibilities. The difficulty in bifurcating it is how many college counselors does the school need for 500 graduates each year? And that is can be a very significant difference. So the counselors have elected over the years to use the generalist approach, especially in order to be able to serve students on a longitudinal basis, meaning the same group of kids from 9 through 12. You know, at one time, for example, we had a freshman counselor who focused just on the freshmen, but that's when the freshman class was 200 kids, not 500 kids. I mean, these are things that can be looked at, but the difficulty is going to be if we're separating the responsibilities of the counselors into those who are dealing with scheduling, dealing with personal issues, you know, social emotional issues, and those dealing with college counseling, that would be we would have to essentially, what are better term, we probably need to double the number of counselors we have. And it's just not feasible. It's not feasible financially, nor is it feasible even in terms of space. Now, however, if somebody has greater expertise in terms of college counseling, all of our counselors get a tremendous amount of training through the CPS programming, and also with college visits, the interactions with the admissions people and so forth. So I don't think it's a lack of skills and knowledge on the part of the counselors. I think more than anything else, it's a volume issue, and trying to identify which students have the greater need for the guidance, and they're trying to provide the guidance overall for everybody. And again, as we've grown, that has become more and more a challenge.
So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, real quick. I was just gonna say, I think the college programming is a little bit lackluster here to the point where like the BSU is doing their own like applying the college roll back like seminar, which I think is great. But I was also thinking like, is it possible to contact like a third party organization? Because that's how I got the majority of my information to record a different program. So I would say maybe like for juniors, because if that is 500 per year is a lot of students, maybe just targeting juniors because they're transitioning into their senior year. And I think summer is a great time to start like college preparation. Just like contacting a third party organization and have them come in for like once a month maybe and just do a little lesson on like ED versus ER or stuff like that, and like just break down like overall topics. I think stuff like that is just really useful as well.
Well, they have worked with some third-party organizations, for example, in terms of the essay writing workshops and things like that. So that could be a direction, that would be beneficial.
Just for one last comment on this, I am concerned to hear that some of your response was that there's not a lot of awareness of this being a problem. And I really think that our vote last year to, allocate the $25,000 and other discussions throughout the year, including the equity report that the equity committee put together for the LSC last year, showing like some of the really big gaps in college enrollment by race and gender. And those gaps go back, and but that just seeing those gaps means we have a problem and we're not serving all students sufficiently. And so, that, it's right there that there's a problem. Even, it should be unknown at this point, I think. So it really seems like, the counseling department should be looking at that, but also the administrative team, and that is a thing to be actually addressing that stuff. And so to have had all this money this year and not have spent it is very concerning. And I have firsthand stories from the senior class saying we could use more help. Is a big issue. So in terms of figuring out what we're going to spend next year, that Rachel is right though, that if we are just like, hey, we're allocating this and it doesn't get spent, I don't know what else the LSC can really do to show their priorities more than say we want this money spent this way. So,
Yeah, it has to be in the CIWP then. It has to become a priority in there. I mean, not that I know what's going on in the CIWP, but I'm just saying for the next LSC, that should be a priority.
Violet.
I don't know who to direct this to, but it doesn't, to me, it sounds more like an organizational structural issue than anything else. And I feel like really terrible that I'm like ending my 2 years here and I'm like just asking this. I know there's department chairs, but like, I don't want to put the blame on the counseling department because it sounds like they're wearing a lot of hats and there's like not enough. I'm coming from a school where we do have 5 college counselors and we don't have 500 students, but we do have 200. And there is that one-on-one support. And we are like much more under-resourced than Jones is. So I'm wondering just like, what is the org structure, especially having like 4 APs, three APs. And then like who oversees the counseling department? And then like, how is responsibility delineated within the counseling department so that we're not like a social worker and also trying to get you into Princeton? Like, I don't know, I think Ellen has answered my questions around this before, but is there like a thing, a chart?
There's the roles and responsibilities chart, and I think anything else that the administrative team can share.
If I may, just to offer like a creative solution, I think a summer program would help. Something to what Daniel was kind of alluding to. We have Freshman Connection, which is like 2 weeks, right? Or for students who can't attend that first week, they have an option of coming the second week, vice versa. But having a college summer program that's 1 week, that's organized and hosted by the counseling department, or we're outsourcing, we're bringing in a third party to help those juniors, those rising seniors, right? Through the college program, through the college process, starting early, that 1 week in the summer. And I think that the test prep services was a success. When we used that MFT fund, 361 students out of 500, I believe, or about 500, participated. They attended the 8-week program, and it was a success. So I think we should continue doing something like that, whether it's a targeted approach where we're identifying students. I understand it was a huge cost, right?
Right.
120.
We're not gonna have those funds again.
But
But we have other ways we're working toward developing a more of our own in-house approach to it, so.
Yeah, and I think, I understand we have some, I guess what I would like to see is to really, what I'm hearing is that our staff, our teachers, our faculty and staff, they have a variety of priorities. And if we bring in like academic approach, where their focus is to prepare these students for these high stakes standardized tests, I think that alleviates some of that stress that we put on our teachers, and they can focus what's best in the classroom. I get $120,000 is a lot, and that was covered from the MFT funds, but perhaps we can modify that expense to target students who maybe struggled, or maybe to put a metric, students who scored below the Jones average. And I think I saw in your Eagles Nest, it was like 1286, right? So students who scored below 1286, we identify those students, we get them into the program, and that way we're not spending $120,000, right? Because my understanding, and I think research has shown, that test prep is directly linked to wealth. Those who can pay for it will do well, and those who can't, they're on their own, or they are maybe not necessarily on their own, but they're leaning on the school to help them. And I think this is a good use of Jones as a college preparatory to really help those students.
Alexandra will do her comment, and then I think try to bring the budget discussion to some sort of next steps.
Yeah, I just think it's important, I guess, not underestimate the power that like FOJ funds could have, because I don't know, instead of just accepting, oh, well, we can't fund it, so we can't try anything like it, or we can't do it. It is always possible to request funds from like FOJ. So like that's an important thing, a step that could be taken.
On that point, we had 25 grand set aside for the budget, 16 grand from MFT fund that we didn't utilize. So it's also a structural issue. So both.
Sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
because these 25,000 were spent, they'll roll over into next year, right?
If we decide to make that part of the budget line item. So that's what Rachel's saying. Do we roll that up and make it 50 grand that we're going to do for targeted test prep because that's a priority? Or do we keep it 25 and we let the administration decide how they want to do test prep or college counseling? But if, if it's deja vu again, 2023 May, when the budget meeting, it's gonna be a little upsetting.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable like approving the budget when we know that it's not going to be spent. And if we can move that money to test prep because it was used by the MFT fund, that's just my, if we know that money can be spent, because there's already a precedent for it versus we don't know, maybe it won't get, maybe it will.
Or could we categorically grant that money to then be spent with the intention of like, I don't know, like a 1 week summer course to talk about college stuff, like, is there a way we could provide a specific incentive to a set of money?
I think, I don't know if this answered your question, but, I think a directive from the administration to the counseling department saying, hey, if we combine these two, there's $50,000. We allocated that for college and test prep services. It sounds like this year, we had a great relationship with academic approach, reach out to Andrew Ferguson, figure out if there's some way we can target students and also provide a summer program. I think it really does come from the administration to direct the counseling department to let them know that there's these funds and they need to be spent by, or half of those funds need to be spent by this period, and then the remaining funds have to be spent by this period.
Lenny?
How was it worded last year? Like at this point last year, when you were talking about college prep, how was it worded?
It was just how that line item is listed. College.
So how can we change it to make it?
College counseling and access and college fairs.
And it wasn't used for that. So how can we make it even more specific so it actually gets used? Does it need to have like a date on it or something? No.
I mean, the council just recommends. So even if we make it specific, we don't oversee the spending of it actually, like. That's kind of my issue, I guess, is like putting like our stamp of approval or voting on it when we know that's like what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, so I had a couple questions on this in terms of like, we have these old textbooks that were purchased for last year, like those numbers. aren't
Right,
really
so-
close here. So how, can we really vote on this right now? Like, I mean, I have,
If we wanted to vote on it, we would have to say, that 7% of the budget we're allocating for textbooks. Right now, the document that Ellen has shared with us, and she put in the chat, she doesn't have hard costs for everything, but it's less than that amount, what we have so far. We have like 7,000, she put it in the chat. Is that way over
entirely
allocated?
English novels.
Right, and I'm looking at this list, it's not like a beautiful spreadsheet or anything, it's copied and pasted in this document. And I don't see other books. Ellen, I don't know if you can chime in.
Yeah, for sure. So Kim reached out to department chairs and like received back feedback about textbook needs. So far, sorry, there's weird feedback. So far, the only quotes that we've received are for those English novels. So I think our next step is to like ask that those department chairs then come up with those quotes and make sure to share them with the budget committee. Because I'm not sure that they have, or maybe they shared them directly with Mr. Burney and not with me. I'm not sure.
We have anything from the English department regarding the
There were very few novels that were given to me, that we just actually did a purchase order for Violet, I believe, but it wasn't close to.
That's what the English department was requesting.
Correct.
Okay.
And it was really to replace,
Yeah.
Damaged textbooks, novels, things of that nature.
Yeah, so I mean, we have options. We could just punt and just come back, do a special meeting and have more details, or we say, we allocated 38,000, 7%. And
Yeah, so not to mix a million agenda items, but the date for the June meeting, Sarah cannot meet that day. So that day, the scheduled meeting is
June
before June 10th. But so, and we need to have the CAWP vote done by June 10th. So I think, and given our need for thinking about the CAWP as we make decisions anyway, I think it would make sense to just have another special meeting this month at the close to the end of the month, do the CAWP, do a final vote on this. If we could have some kind of proposal or more information about what spending $50,000 on college preparation, textbook and counseling would look like, that would make sense, so that we would have a better idea about like are we just writing a blank check, letting it get spent? You know, is it really taking into account family and student input? Go ahead.
So, just to clarify, this needs to be approved by, all of this, the budget needs to be approved by June 10th?
The budget doesn't exactly, because it's our internal accounts and it can kind of linger on. But the CWP vote needs to be forwarded.
You're gonna be gone.
No, I just was gonna, yes,
You'd be
yes.
around.
But, I was gonna suggest that perhaps we should just set a deadline that we're going to approve the budget on X date and request that teachers submit their book requests, you know, on X date before that, because otherwise it seems like maybe it won't get done. So like, you need to submit your book requests or they won't be in the budget.
I think we have heard from the departments that want to purchase textbooks. It does not have to flow through here. It needs to flow directly to the administration and to the business office. And we have heard from those who, to the best of my knowledge, have already put forward their proposals. We've gotten quotes on those. Pretty much we've lined everything up. I'm not aware of anything that's outstanding beyond that.
And nothing else has been presented other than the things that people want for this year. One thing that I didn't, and I have it in my notes but didn't talk about, is let's not forget, I know this is just really agreeing on a percentage way of budgeting, not necessarily the actual numbers, and I've shared as much as I could to be really transparent about what we've spent and what we've not spent. And I know it's not the best optic, but it's our reality, honestly. And can we spend less in certain areas and put it towards? Yes. But I don't think those decisions will have to be made tonight because there's so many unknowns. Next month, it'll be something else that we don't know about. So this is a live and living document, quite honestly, and we will have to make adjustments, but we will need to firm it up when we allocate the student fee. We have to be firm. We can't switch gears mid-year. So we have to be stern with that. That being said, if we fall short on testing, novels, equipment, professional developments, whatever it is, remember, we still have funds that reserve funds that we can rely on to supplement. Even if the activity fees are not in at the time, if other things are not in at the time, it won't be, we can't do this because we're smart this year in our budgeting to prepare for the unknowns that might happen the upcoming year. So I don't want people to walk away thinking that we're not going to have money to do everything we need to do from a counseling perspective, textbook perspective. We will. We will have it.
Lenny?
Thank you, Mr. Bernie. I really appreciate all the work that you've put into this, and Sarah, if you can explain it so clearly. I think though, I feel like what Rachel was bringing up though was just accountability. You know, we put this line item on this budget, which is really a moral document. You know, what is it that we are prioritizing in this organization? I mean, this is a college preparatory school, and we as an LSC, myself, I can't explain to my kids how we have helped her particularly to get where she is, you know, in her college career. She's not put forward anything that proves to me that the school has any kind of system to support people who want to. In fact, every single person who comes through Jones should be able to apply for all the colleges that they, you know, beyond what CPS sends us in the mail, which is really not super helpful. I think that we can do so much better. And I feel like a line on a budget should not just be there to exist, but to actually stand for something. And I should be able to explain that to my kids. And also to the next LSC, which I feel like we should be passing something on that is a little bit better than what we came you're, in the beginning, should be better for the next people stepping out.
So one more thing that we did not really cover in this spreadsheet, this idea of having a capstone department budget and the theater manager. And are there other requests that we've done besides the computer science teachers? And we also really have not discussed, like, there was like the theater project previously, right? And there's the North Auditorium Lobby project. Are there other facilities things that should really be discussed at this time? And should be planned for? And I think Alexander's point was very good, that it's like, and you've mentioned this numerous times, that we have a fundraising organization, and so that planning should be part of the overall planning for what we are prioritizing, especially if we're, have like a racial equity viewpoint on how we're prioritizing those things. So I think we were gonna vote on the student fee amount as well tonight.
I mean, I honestly think that what we do vote on is the student fee, and then how it's allocated. And so I think it would, without having at least the due diligence to show that we tied because our SBB funding is all for positions, we don't really have any other time to tie budgeting to the CIWP except for this internal budget.
You can during with positions as well. We have not done that, but you can.
Right.
We just haven't done it.
Right, and absolutely, I know that it has been said in the past that the CIWP didn't require money. I might beg to differ on some of that. So I think for due diligence, it would be better to have the CIWP presented and this, Mr. Bernie and I can go back and just tweak a little things, like talk about Capstone, and then try to just shore up some things as far as perhaps Dr. Powers can look at. I don't know if seniors might work all summer. I don't know if they, or juniors, rising seniors might not want to come this summer for like a college prep thing, but maybe they would for a week if they knew when it was. So that is something I think was a good idea to jumpstart that process. So I don't know if there is a third party. You worked with a third party?
I worked with Thrive. I had to apply.
You had to apply. So, but potentially they would know, they would be a good
I
start.
can contact.
So perhaps you could reach out and let Dr. Powers know. I think that's a minimum. It's not a lot of work that we could put into just feel better about the vote.
But I do think it's something that needs to come through with the counseling
Absolutely.
department. And it's, of course, it's going to be a question of they're also working on freshman connection, for example, and whether or not they're available to do a lot of these things this summer.
Right, and maybe it's not this summer, but maybe it's the future or something that maybe they've had this in mind. Is the counseling, so speaking of accountability, counseling, are they part of like ILT or PPLC or are they?
Yes, they're represented.
They're represented.
So we have 3 more Tuesdays this month, so I think, we can make one of those work, and I think that can be a CIWP, and, it's probably not super crucial whether we vote on the student fee matter at that point, and then vote on essentially this percentage allocation at the same time.
Just for a point of clarification, what are the remaining issues that we're having with this? So college, the $50,000 that's allocated to college counseling, test prep services, right? The theater manager, we're gonna allocate funds for the theater manager, is that part of this? And then what's the third? Or the capstone? And is there something else that I'm missing?
Yeah, I think that should be it. Apparently, we're gonna keep the American pageant, America's Most Racist textbook again next year. So not happy to hear that, but if the teachers don't want to change it, what do you do?
They're barely using it. That's the thing, they're using primarily supplemental materials. And primary sources.
Daniel?
One suggestion for the capstone, if you want to, and you need the fees, right here is the elective science classes, maybe like add its own like elective capstone.
Oh, add a fee for
Yeah.
capstone
That could,
to fund it as an activity.
because I don't think they need a lot of money. I don't want to say it's mainly that some students need money to do their projects and they have good ideas, but they don't have the funding to do that. And so kind of like insurance policy, like everyone contributes and those who need it end up taking it.
And then seminar doesn't need any money, so
Seminar doesn't need
just
anything.
one half of it does.
What's that?
Oh, the capstone program is 2 classes, one in junior year, one in senior year. Junior year is AP seminar, senior year is AP research. Only AP research needs money because you're conducting your own research, whereas AP seminar is using like online sources to find research, so you don't need any money to do it.
And that is junior year's AP research?
Junior year,
Senior.
Okay.
Also, they do also pay for a mentor matching engine, which I don't know where that comes out of, but that is a yearly thing that they pay. We approved it once. I just don't recall where it came from.
Okay, mentor matching.
Was the question about the capstone, whether it would become a department and need a department head who needed?
It wouldn't be a department, it's only 3 teachers, and they cross over between departments. So if there is a separate funding need for it, it's something we could certainly talk about as far as making it part of the departmental funding and the idea of having an additional fee, class fee for that. But again, I've not had that presented to me.
We talked about it
And,
last.
So I think it's something that needs to be presented by the capstone teachers in terms of, what the need is before we put it into a budget.
Ellen, do you want to go?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I agree, Daniel, that the mentor matching service we had approved in the past. And so my understanding is that came from like general funds because it was not, there wasn't a department line for it. I do think that one of the concerns with Capstone is because there are teachers from different academic departments who teach within that program. That's actually a bit of a problem because it's like they're pulling from English or they're pulling from social studies department budgets to fund something that's cross-departmental. So my understanding is, like Alex was saying, for the supporting students doing research projects, the need is not huge. It's like a couple thousand for some supplies. I believe Dr. Powers, I think Ms. Miller's was going to talk to you about this actually tomorrow. So I think, yeah, for sure. But I think the question is, if there is this new line, would the mentor matching then come out of the line and just like to maintain that awareness? And then because one of the student fees is, there is an additional student fee for AP. Oh, no, there isn't. It's an additional AP exam fee. So there isn't currently another student fee for that class. So I guess that would affect that. If that's.
I'm not on the dock anymore, but is there a senior fee? Like, is there a senior fee for senior events, like graduation fee?
How many people in Capstone are classing?
There's 2 seminar classes and each probably has like 20-ish people in it, maybe 25, so that's 50, and then I don't know how many are in research.
I don't know how many sections we have.
There's 2.
2.
Yeah.
I think we're probably looking at altogether perhaps, maybe not quite that many, but yeah.
Because like pretty much every single seminar student also takes research, so maybe 90 something.
So just to clarify, on the college prep, line item. So like, I just want to go back to what Cassie said, like, we identified the need last year, and so we put it in the budget. And specifically the equity committee identified, the need for additional support in that area. So moving forward, I guess, like, to feel comfortable voting, because I understand, I think the point that the money may be there. in some shape or form, but, what is the solution? That's like, we're going to see, I guess. That's kind of what I would like to see in the next meeting that we have, so we can vote on the fees specifically.
Well, wouldn't the test prep need to still be there because the MFT funds aren't for next year, and so they need to be there so that they can be here for next year?
I mean, if there's, I guess for me, it's like, if we know what to spend on, because otherwise, like, you can pull from another area if there's like leftovers and stuff. That's kind of just like the existence of that's why it's there, I guess.
I think we didn't have the need for the funds that were budgeted at this time last year because the MFT funds came later. However, because we will not have the MFT funds, we're not going to be able to obligate to 100,000 plus outside available for all students. If we're looking at a more targeted approach or an organic approach through English and math, as Ms. Miller and Mr. Biasia are working on now, then those could be funds that we could dedicate to that, because we won't necessarily have other funds available to support it. And that will include, time, for example, we have had over the years, we've had a math prep class for anybody who wants to sign up for it. It's typically 100 or 150 juniors sign up for it prior to the SAT. And that can mesh with the plans that we're talking about, with more being done within the curriculum. In other words, looking at curriculum again, where those kinds of things are integrated and again become organic to the freshman, the sophomore, and the junior curriculum in English, and the same in math. Those I think are going to be very useful. Funds such as this, and again, at this particular point, we have no idea what kind of costs we're talking about here. But I would think if we had a line item to use for that particular initiative to take the place of what we were able to do this year because we had a large amount of money, that's going to be could be a powerful tool for us. But that's something I need to talk to Ms. Miller and Mr. Biasia a little bit further, because again, they've outlined a basic outline of the plan and the idea. It's just a matter of paying for the time and the effort to go into it, and then how that's going to be rolled out next year. Everything from what's done within the classes, within the classroom, within the curriculum, but also what's done in terms of outside of school time.
I guess, sorry, I should have clarified. I was talking about the like college counseling aspect, not necessarily like the test prep. Like I totally hear what you're saying there. But in terms of like, we don't know what kind of program we have like ideas on the table, but we don't know what program we would put into place. If we allocate that much, that's kind of what I would like to see. Is like a specific plan, I guess.
Yeah, so either like if there's an idea that test prep is going to be taken care of through some in-class stuff, then a description of that, and a description of how this $50,000 could be used to support college enrollment and college application. I think is what, because I mean, to be completely honest, I'd rather spend $50,000 on straight up academic approach, because I know it's going to be spent, who's going to get it, it will get done. Maybe that's not the bottom line needed, but it will be used. I mean, like, and I'm a person who thinks standard tests are garbage and should all be burned. But I would still rather see that done than just to have it, to hear next May that money has been spent, that should be spent.
The money wasn't spent because we had other resources.
Yeah, no, but we didn't spend those either for that. So let's be honest here. Okay?
We'll take care of it. We'll take care of it. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we will not do a vote on A, and so we can close that discussion and we'll move on. Unless else is covered. Ellen, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I just wanted to, sorry, 1 second. I'm gonna mute my computer audio so I don't hear the feedback. Sorry if y'all are having that. I want to just clarify and ask what the need is regarding textbooks specifically. I recognize that's a small fraction of the budget. So it was proposed that like the 7% be like what we leave in there. It was also mentioned that like it would be helpful to have those specific quotes. So I think the question is, what do we need for the next meeting, whenever that might be, in the next couple of Tuesdays? And what, like, who is doing that? So are Kim and I reaching out to department chairs, asking them to forward quotes to the budget committee? Is somebody else reaching out from the administrative team? Like, what's going on with that?
We're doing that through the business office. In other words, if a department wishes to purchase a new textbook or whatever the programming might be, but especially a textbook, then they provide us with a quote. We start the process of placing the order, identify the resources that we have available and so forth. And that's what needs to be done. That's how it's done.
So would it be helpful, Dr. Powers, if I shared with you the list that people like Kim and I had received from department chairs?
It sure as heck would.
Okay, I've shared it with Mr. Burney. I wasn't sure if that also got to you. I wasn't sure who I'm sharing things with, so I will share that with you right now.
A lot of things seem to be going around past me. And I don't think it's lack of attention on my part. I think there's been a lot of bypassing going on here. I mean, a lot of the discussions we've had tonight are things that I have not been privy to prior to this. So let's see if we can keep me in the loop on these things, please. Because I will be here next year.
So we don't have approvals, right?
Oh, we do. We have
We do?
two. Let me share those.
So let's-
They were just popped in there.
I think we can do those and then we can take a little break and then we'll do the CWP. I don't think the old business will be pretty quick. And then we'll do reports. So yeah, I think this will be after the approvals, let's take a break.
I share this. Scary, this panorama camera. I haven't seen it and really don't want to. I have like ADHD, so. Oh my God. Okay, let's see. What is this? Check. This is Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. This is pretty exciting. So we're allowed to buy this, Mr. Burton?
Are we allowed to buy?
Well, I think it was like in limbo from the, what is that called?
Well, if this was something we've already had, this is just renewing the subscription, correct?
That's correct.
So there's one for renewing the subscription. And one for theater department supplies. So using those budgets. Antibiotic, I don't, I didn't read it. I just,
The first aid.
it's a first aid kit. Oh, more gym locks. That's exciting. That's student fee, look at that gym uniform fee. And then that's it, right? So we got gym PD locks, theater supplies,
Oh,
and then
Can you define theater supplies? Like, what does that mean?
it says,
Okay.
digital safe stand fire folding tables, dollies, laminate tables, hangers. I guess you guys are getting organized. Is it a hot mess back there? That's a little. Okay.
A little bit.
So, yeah, so if there's any questions about those. If not, we come here. Let me find my minutes. All right, so I make a motion to approve the check request 39.16 to CW for Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, 2514 to Uline for theater department supplies, 4710.
It's 2514.
What is it?
Isn't it 2514?
Yeah, what did I say?
3514.
Oh, I'm reading 25. Yeah, eyes are older. 4710 for gym locks. Then seconded, take a roll call, Andrade,
Yay.
Bowman. She's here.
Yay.
Sarah Prado,
Yeah.
Clancy,
Yeah.
Cresswell,
Yay.
Kilbrams,
Yay.
Kerr,
Yay.
Land, Yay, Hannah Hoppenworth, yay, my consent.
Yes.
Dinar,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen. Yes. All right. Happy purchasing. No budget transfers, no fundraisers, and I don't believe there's any facility use rental agreements, right?
Okay, so let's recess, I guess, till 8. And everyone's kind of slow, but try to like come back in 5 minutes.
And it's.
There we go, 7:03. Okay, I will call us back to order. It's 8:02.
Thank you for.
Okay, so the next item is this one we just added, essentially, oh, yeah, roll call.
Oh, yeah.
Ellen Kim.
Thank you, Daniel.
I know, proceed.
Andrade. Here. Bowman.
Here.
Napraga. Here. Clancy.
Here.
Cresswell. Here. Gilberto.
Here.
Kerr. Here. Land. Here. Mana Hoppenwood. I mean, she's Ma here. Martin Set. Here. Jabbar.
Present.
Flores.
Here.
Set. Here.
Okay, so this, so normally the continuous improvement work plan is on a 2-year cycle. And so we would be approving a whole new plan in May. But partly because of the pandemic, but I think actually more driven by the fact that CPS is changing its school quality rating entire schema. They are just extending the CIWP for a 3rd year. And so normally you vote every 2 years, you know, on a new plan. And then if you change it in between time, the LSC should also vote to approve. But they're asking all LSCs to approve it now, even if you aren't changing anything, essentially. So we should do that by June 10th.
That can easily be done by then.
Yeah, so I think we got an update that was mostly, we got an update, I guess, in October. I think that content was mostly from August. So we're due an update in any case. And I think as it's clear from this budget discussion, knowing what our priorities are would help in deciding, you know, whether we're really spending enough money on the things that we want to happen. So I think, you know, having an update on anything that's changed, an update on anything that we'd want to have changed. And I don't believe we ever got a list of CIWP team members. So I don't know if there's an active CIWP team. I don't know if they've been meeting. I don't believe that anyone else in the LLC knows that either. So that would be, we need basically that basic information. And, you know, an assessment of the 4 priorities, the right 4 priorities, you know, and what are those to refresh everyone's memory and how are we measuring them. And so I think that is what we want an update on when we have this next meeting, and we want to put this in before June 10th. Go ahead, Sarah.
I would just add that if there were any amendments, like if Dr. Plunkett has changes based on the past 2 years or based on feedback that you give her, this is the time to do that.
And the one other thing is that following the meeting that we had in October to review the CIWP, 2 LSC members provided questions to Dr. Plunkett and the CIWP team based on our experience with CIWPs at other schools, as well as looking for more in-depth information about metrics on the CIWP. And we took, as the members of the LSC, a lot of time to think about really substantive questions, and we received no feedback. And so I would really like to see, you know, take a look at the questions that we provided to Dr. Plunkett and ask if there's any updates or feedback, because those were questions for clarification and questions on metrics.
CIWP.
So after it's extended for this 3rd year, is it gonna be for 1 year or again 2 years?
I don't No, they haven't fixed that.
No, I think the entire structure may be changed.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through several different iterations of this over the years.
I think the package that I received said they were planning to move to a 3-year term because that was more consistent with something ISB was doing.
But there may be changes to the instrumentation of it too. Have we talked about a date yet in terms of,
No, we could just do that
Special
now,
meeting.
probably. It's number 8, but let's
I would appreciate
pick
that.
that.
That'd be good.
Not next week.
Yeah, I mean, so probably the 24th or the 31st. Makes more sense.
I can't do it.
You can't do the
I
24th.
can't.
Well, you have a test.
No, I have a different, I have.
Okay.
24th is the night before our honors convocation, so we're going to be pretty busy around it. But 31st would work for me.
Yeah, I think 31st is fine.
What date is that?
Tuesday, it's day after Memorial Day.
Is that? No, finals week? Or?
Yeah, well, senior finals are the first and second, yeah, it's the night before senior finals.
Senior finals are not.
That's not what I was saying.
You're correct.
There are waivers for.
Oh, yeah, the
There are
waivers.
a lot of projects leading up to it that are not part of that, so.
Yes.
As long as it does not adversely affect any of the current members.
Yeah.
And the undergraduate exams are the following week.
Okay, so I,
Yeah.
okay.
Third and fourth.
And and just a quick question, the schedule you emailed out is the undergraduate schedule.
That's correct, but the senior schedule is the AB schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Just the regular class schedule.
Yeah, I mean, we're not stuck to a Tuesday, but I think. I know yours could already.
Back to class.
Yeah, so let's plan for the Tuesday the 31st.
That's gonna be the CWIP and the budget, right?
Yeah, so we'll do that. Yes, we'll vote on that budget and previous to that, have the data discussion. Okay, so then we are moving on to old business. I did not update that equity needs and resources spreadsheet. So that does not need a discussion. So for the response from the CEO to the letter that we voted on the 26th, we did not receive a response. So, you know, we have various alternatives. Really, you know, any individual of us can do, you know, make our own response. But we also, the board members have office hours. And you can just basically meet with one of the Board of Ed members. They assign you one, you know, just pick. And it's like a 15 or 20-minute appointment. So that is an option for us to go, you know, basically try to get some answers to the things that we put in this letter from Board of Ed members. And, you know, up to 4 of us could go to that if people are interested. And that could be something that we as an LSC, you know, want to make happen and say we want to do that. Obviously, any 4 of us could also just, you know, make an appointment for office hours in addition to that or instead of that. So people have other thoughts or ideas on that topic? Now is the time.
I'll do opposite.
I would say to prevent something from happening like last time with the letter, where a lot of people were like so blindsided, we would just inform, I don't know, is that allowed?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
inform that it's happening that day and like what's
Yeah.
going to be covered.
So, I mean, like, if we're deciding, like, as a group that we want to send, you know, for or whatever, we can do that now and decide who wants to go. So, like, it's like, it would probably be useful to have a student, if you guys have the claim.
Okay.
Yeah, no, just say that, I swear.
So whatever.
So you like fight over it once you get.
Yeah.
the-
Duke it out.
Any other, adult members interested?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Did they not acknowledge at all?
they did not confirm receipt. That's what your question is. Yeah. And also, we can make 2 appointments if there's more of us that want to go. Which there may actually be interest. If 2 students in or adults already. Cool. So yeah, well, I'll see if we can get 2 appointments done and accommodate, as many of us as time.
If I may ask, like, what is the, what are you, like,
What are your
attempting to
goals?
accomplish? Yeah. I think we've discussed this. We drafted up, the initial letter. CPS responded, or the CPS CEO responded 45 days. We asked for some additional clarification. We submitted it in their hands. But that's from my perspective. I'm just trying to understand, like, what is this? What are you all trying to accomplish, or what is this body or individuals or
We
groups?
asked specific questions and they, I think they deserve an answer. In the letter, I think it's just speaking to the letter. This is the letter. Do you have any answers to the questions in the letter? And if they say they cannot answer, then we give it, then we at least know that they've read it.
What's the State Board of Education going to do about that, given that this is budget?
No, the Chicago board.
On it.
Yeah. So, I mean, they supervise, yeah.
From my perspective, there's an ongoing investigation that was outlined in the letter that we got back. I would like to know, like, what are the updates on that investigation? Because it's one thing to say there's an ongoing investigation, it's another thing to actually understand where that investigation is at.
Didn't we get a letter saying that they finished the investigation
No.
and it didn't, or was that, just did I read that wrong?
No, I think you read the letter that they sent to the school community, and that's what that said.
Feel like that there's no more investigation anymore. And it's like.
They made it sound, yes, but then we got an LSC letter and it had different wording and.
Was that
Not what it
forwarded
read.
to the rest of us, the LSC letter? Okay.
Yeah, it's also linked in the minutes.
Yeah, we did that at the open part last time.
Oh,
Yeah.
I missed that.
But I think to your point, Alexandra, when the CEO, CPS emailed it to the LSC, I don't think they included the student representatives. And then it was the LSC who forwarded on to the
We had a
student reps.
very, very old list of LSC members that they emailed.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, it's still included like last year's. Yeah.
And is it possible if there is a current ongoing investigation that they wouldn't be able to answer questions currently because like that's a breach of whatever investigation is happening or a breach of like privacy? Well,
They can have a confidential discussion with us in closed session. And discuss stuff with us because it's, that would be perfectly possible. Yeah, and the Board of Ed will not necessarily have answers like about that, but because we wrote to your CEO and he didn't respond and we still have questions and what is, we want you to know that as a Board of Ed member.
Perhaps we would send a follow-up letter before we schedule a meeting with the board, just, like, hey, we tried, like, please confirm that you've received this. It doesn't have to be as lengthy as the first one. We could probably write it right now if we want to. That way, at least we have tried again before we go and take up the board's valuable time.
I don't think the board is going to stop doing it. And I think it's our right to take up that time as constituents. We can't even elect them, they could at least give us their time.
I'm not suggesting that we don't see them. I'm simply suggesting that we attempt to exhaust our available options before we move on to that.
Yeah, I can write and just ask, like, did anyone, confirm receipt?
So to William's point, I think
It's
that
more our valuable time that we're taking up.
fair.
To William's point, I think, if this body wanted to do something, I think that is the most appropriate step, is sending a follow-up email saying, we just want someone from CPS to acknowledge that they received this, and if they're going to respond. If members of this body, just to, I think what Daniel alluded to, if individuals or groups of individuals are going to go in front of the Chicago board, that we don't make the same misstep, and is suggesting that we're speaking on behalf of the entire LSC, but we're speaking on individual representatives or a group.
And I think it would be good to alert the wider general community before those meetings happen, just so that no one gets like upset about feeling blindsided.
Well, I think that's what this alert is.
Okay.
Meeting, people know that we're gonna try to make a couple appointments in the board event. Yeah.
Those are individual appointments. Those are
Like six of
not
us
a
were
public
interested.
presentation.
It's not in front of the.
So is a letter being
Oh, yeah, this is
It's
office
gonna
hours.
come up.
This is office hours. This is not the public meeting. This is
Okay.
an appointment you make to go during
Yeah,
their
then
office
that's when
hours.
it says office hours.
Yeah, so I totally think the office hours is a great idea. I would just, okay, my perspective is, if I sent an email to Dr. Powers and I didn't get a response, my first instinct is not to go and contact Dr. Powers' boss, but to send Dr. Powers a follow-up email asking if he received the email. So I would just suggest we send a follow-up email. It doesn't have to be all of us, it could just be one person. And that way, at least we are, one of the things we talk about is our best practices of having an open mind. At least we gave them 2 chances to respond before we go and meet with this board.
I feel like that's traditionally procedure when sending an email and expecting a response, to try like one and then another.
Rachel?
I just feel like if the response that we're trying to get back from the CEO's office is, I read your letter, that's not,
Gonna be sufficient anyway.
no, it's not gonna be sufficient anyways, so I totally agree, like, follow up, totally need to do that, but, and like concurrently, maybe we can think about what office hours would look like. Especially because if we get what I think we will get if we ask for confirmation of receipt back, what's our next steps? Is it just to say, okay, they read the letter? It's like, no, we have questions. Can you
Yeah,
help us?
so I could write, ask it for a confirmation of receipt. If they send us an amazing response, I would circulate that before we make an appointment.
I think that, at least speaking for myself, I think that would be the appropriate next step. And we can concurrently schedule these meetings with the board, we'll discuss what that.
Yeah.
When is the office hours?
Just kind of like random times that the board members are available, essentially. So, but since we have like students who want to do it, like it has to be workable for that. So I think, we did one like, they do them virtually still probably. So it could be something like 4 or something, Okay, so I think that's like a plan of action. Yeah, it can be done without the majority reform. So to be pretty straightforward.
Kenzie, I have a question on a different topic. Are you coming back to equity, or did we just say there was nothing? to talk about?
No, we can discuss equity stuff under the equity initiative report.
Okay, because I have a question.
Yeah. Okay, I think that one is done. Okay, and we will now move on to reports. And first up is principal's report.
Thank you. Everyone has a copy of this. We're rushing up to the end of the school year, so a lot of the focus is on the activities and so forth that have been going on, the showcases. I mentioned this is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and our AAC, Asian American Club, is putting on a great showcase coming up this Thursday evening. We already had last weekend the Alas Fest, which came back for the first time live, fortunately. Since pandemic, it was a lot of fun. Food was very good as well. Our blueprint has been recognized yet again by the McCormick Foundation for High School Media, receiving some tremendous recognition for their work. And they receive also, in addition to the many different subsets of awards that take place on that, they receive what was called a sweepstakes award. In other words, that goes to a school that has the largest number of the individual subsets of awards. And that was shared with one other school. Last year, for the last time, it was just our school received that award. Quick enrollment updates for you. We are still in the process of completing several things. We did complete the principal discretion. All those seats have been allocated, and we've met with the students and their families, those that were able to come for our welcome program. We're going to round 2 for selective enrollment. That will be at the beginning of June. I'm trying to see if we can get that moved up. But that's when CPS or the Office of Access and Enrollment is running it. It will be around the beginning of June, but we're hoping to do it sooner so we can build our schedule a little bit more concretely. We pretty much completed the wait list calls for CTE, and that added a good number of kids to the list that had already accepted those positions. That's a total of about 75 to 80 students over the two programs. And finally, I'm working on right now, all of us are working on right now, the transfer process. We received about 150 transfer requests for grades 10 through 12, which is pretty typical for what we normally get from one year to the next. However, we don't have 150 seats, obviously, to offer them in those grade levels. Right now, as of this report, I was saying we'd have between 15 and 20 seats, but it looks like we're going to do a bit more than that. Right now, I'm looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 rising sophomores and probably around 10 rising juniors. I don't have any rising seniors that are currently in the mix there, but that's taken quite a bit of time to review the applications. Like I said, about 150 different applications. So those all have to be submitted. Their requests have to be submitted to the Office of Access and Enrollment. They have to then give permission to move forward for that, and then we notify the students that they're approved for transfer.
Can you repeat the junior number again?
The junior number, approximately 10, something like that. Yeah, it's a little bit of a moving target. It depends on how many kids we actually have in the current class that's moving up. So, for example, sometimes over the summer, if we find ourselves seeing our numbers shift, maybe a couple of families move away, something like that, we feel like we have some additional seats to offer, we might go back and contact some families that maybe we were not able to initially, but we will be notifying everybody who has applied one way or the other. But again, probably no more than about 30 total, 35 total is what we're looking at. Our senior events are clicking away, and next one up is prom. I've got the schedule there for the exams, for the checkout day, and more details going to the seniors a little bit later on. We have graduation rehearsal, cap and gown pickup, diploma packet pickup after the graduation ceremony at the auditorium theater, and then a number of other events, especially concert type of programs. We've got I think I didn't update we already had the LSC elections. Sorry, this is a section there of upcoming events that is out of date. Sorry for that. The big things coming up are going to be that we have two nights of dance program, and we also have 2 nights of choir programming as well, in addition to the AAC showcase on Thursday. Upstairs, right? Oh, they're doing 2 nights, excuse me. Yeah. The AAC, yeah, well, it's a big show. It's a big show. Yeah, the AAC is 2 nights. It's Thursday and Friday night. Their showcase.
So we have questions? Go ahead, Sarah. My question is about the 5 Essentials survey. Was that sent? I mean, I'm a nerd, so I went and did it myself, but was that sent to the community to do? I know that the CIWP data was tied to some of that feedback, and I just didn't know if it went out. And I know we won't get responses unless we have this, you know, like, we won't see the
Percentage.
teacher, I mean, the parent ones, unless we have like 30% response
I
rate.
believe that's correct.
So I don't know if, what's happening with that. Is that survey dying? Is that still a thing?
I haven't seen any results back yet from it.
But it was never like broadcast to the Jones community to do it.
I thought that all went out via CPS to all the families.
I don't think, I could.
I don't know, I saw online, I just did it on Facebook or something.
But to Dr. Power's point, like the weekly email that we get from CPS included the I believe included the survey, but I think last school year, Dr. Plunkett was sending out emails to the Jones parents, Jones community, encouraging them to complete the 5 essential survey.
Perhaps
That
we didn't
wasn't,
do that this year.
that wasn't completed this year. So I think that's what Sarah was.
Okay.
Isn't there some sort of participation you have to have in order for the data to count?
It's like any data. Look at the teacher and the student data.
Right.
Yeah. It's not-
And that's what I was working on in-house more than anything else, was the student and teacher data.
Any other questions?
So I just want to give a shout out to the Association of Latin American Studies for just a marvelous performance. I think there was like over 100, clearly over 100 families who attended. So it was spectacular. The show was amazing. And Daniel was part of that. So he had a 1-act performance during intermission. So it was just great. It was just great to be in community, great to be in part of the school, great to see the Latino and Hispanic community come out. So, and everybody else to support that event. So it was a joy.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Dr. Powers, and thank you, Friends of Jones.
For the, I do have a question for Dr. Powers regarding the principal discretion. I think that's final, right? Like those students, the
Right.
24, 25.
That is correct, the 23.
The 23. Those students have
We had-
accepted.
Yeah, 22 have accepted, 1 declined, and we went to our alternate list for 1 more.
Okay. Is it, I would like to get, just like we asked before for the principal discretion, if we can get the disaggregated data by race and ethnicity and gender.
Do, yeah. That's not on their application, so it's be a guesstimate at this particular.
Right, but we
Until
can,
they
I think we
register.
discussed, we can use either the zip code, and that would be a proxy of like,
I've been up for it.
right?
And
And
with respect, that's pure guesswork.
sure,
It's
but I'm just coming up with a
especially
creative
with smaller
solution.
numbers
So
like
we can
this.
either do the zip code, or we can also do where their middle school or elementary school that they're coming from.
Probably, I agree, would kind of be guesswork as well as that. I think it kind of might give a good estimate, but I think probably working on the tier system, is the tier system available on applications? I mean, what tier they are in?
No,
No.
But you were able to provide that data.
that was after the fact, after the students had enrolled, and we had the data in our system.
Okay,
But at this stage, we don't have that.
okay,
So that'll have to come after the fact. That'll have to come, after we have everybody
Enrolled.
scheduled in, starting in August, where we're set up for August, the week before school, August 10th, is that it? Okay. And then after that, we still have to fill in the blanks because some people do not respond and have that data. So it takes us some time, often a few weeks, to follow up so we can fill that in.
sure, but it was possible.
Of course, it's possible. I
Yeah.
did it before, yeah.
And is there an estimate of like how close we are to 1970 yet?
That will not be until we get round 2. And what we're asking for in round 2 is up to 60 additional students. And that should put us right there at the number we need for the freshman class, which is 490, or give or take. And the transfers, and this is another reason why I'm keeping the transfer process fluid, I guess you might say at this point. I don't want to overcrowd any of the upper classes, especially the sophomores and the juniors. But at the same time, that is a way in which we can boost up some of our numbers. So I think we're going to make our 1970. If we're a little bit over that, that would be great. We could just get a few more dollars, but we have to be cautious in terms of not overloading any particular class. And right now, the rising sophomore class is the smallest class with just about 460 kids, I think. And the incoming freshman class still is not up to the numbers we need.
Okay, so next on the agenda is the Equity Initiative Report. So Mr. Mitchell did not send us a report this month. Last month there was a report at all. I hope that the LSC has seen the racial equity assessment that Davis Ware put together, and we haven't discussed it yet. It's a really important document, and it was, you know, 15,000 of dollars of the amount spent with Davis Ware, and you know, to not have had some sort of description of what the findings, what next steps they'll lead to, is concerning. And you know, I don't know if you want to actually just bring it up, Sarah, like.
I
mean,
can,
it seems like
do you want me
the
to
school community should
just share it in the chat, or do you want me to bring, is there a certain?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that like, I mean, maybe for the next meeting, we could just have I'll make a slide for it, a high level summary for what it's shared.
I think we can
And
provide
do you guys
that.
have next steps that you shared with the faculty that you're?
And immediately after, well, not immediately, but after we had a chance to meet with Marcia Davis and go over her report, her feedback, what we did next was to have breakout sessions with faculty. We did it by their prep periods. So we had small group discussions. We took in a lot of different information and suggestions from them. We have two things that are, well, actually three things coming out of it for the immediate remainder of the school year. Two of them, I should say, are the reestablishment and reimagining, I guess you might say, of the Climate and Culture Committee, which we're getting started now, and the Equity Committee, which was drawing from the Equal Opportunity Schools project. And that right now is sluggish because we're not getting the feedback we need from them. In any event, those were two things that were going to be steps this spring so that we're ready to grow next fall and even over the summer with different activities. And the third thing was taking a particular step and this came from our discussions with regard to the faculty, taking a particular step in the form of helping to create what I would call kind of a set of guidelines for the classroom. It's been several different ideas have been used, but having some fundamental things that are part of I guess you might call them rules of engagement in the classroom itself in terms of addressing equity issues. And then having that built so that each grade level, or each class, I should say, each classroom with the teacher is able to draw upon that and then utilize feedback from the students to create essentially in our classroom, we do the following. This is how we have our class and how we conduct our class. And then have the resources the teachers need to provide those kinds of dealing with issues as they come up in the classroom. Some are going to be more what I would call the culture or the climate of the classroom. Others will be truly how to respond to various equity related issues as they may come up. So that's something that we're working on here to try to have a fundamental piece of that in place before the end of the school year, so it can be part of our start of the new school year. So those are some of the things that came out of that. Because we're so close to the end of the school year and we have so many other things we're having to do, we're trying to set up the infrastructure for it with the two committees and taking a simple step forward so that by the time we get around to the fall, we'll be able to start doing some things in earnest, even starting during our opening meetings with the faculty.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Powers. That's really helpful to hear that something is concrete going to come out of this. We had almost 800 community respondents, parents and students and all that. And I think it would be respectful of the time that those 800 people, or almost 800 people, took to fill out our survey, that this feedback needs to go beyond just the staff members, but to be shared in a broader sense with the community. Because as I read this document, I see two very distinctive subsets of the Jones community. And one group is very happy with how things are and doesn't want anything to change. And the other group is very frustrated with much of what happens here and is looking for change. And I think that we as school leadership, those of us coming off the LSC, we pass this torch to our new LSC members, that we as the administration and the local school council members have a responsibility to our communities to address the disparities in our population. I mean, it was very interesting reading, because it as a parent and as a local school council member, it validated a lot of the discussions we've been having as a community. And you know, some of it leads to knockdown, drag out fights, and we get that. But that it's not, what it told me as I was reading this is both experiences are true, and both experiences are real and experienced by people in our community. And we have to be a little bit more forthcoming in addressing that to those people who took the time to provide input to the survey. Because outside of the local school council realm, nobody's seen this. And it's a big secret, but people took the time, and they spent a lot of time writing comments and providing more than just the, you know, somewhat or more likely or whatever. They really poured their hearts into this. And I think out of respect for the people who took the time to participate, and in order to facilitate some healing, because it's clear to me that there's a lot of pain involved in this, that we need to be able to start to address the harm and say these two very distinctive groups are all part of Jones, and this is our lived experience, but we have to find a way to say, how do we become one Jones? Because right now we have two Jones. And that was the, you know, and this is not Deborah Land's opinion. This is not, you know, Lenny's opinion, whatever. This is Marcia Davis and her consultants. This is the result of their survey. This is, you know, the school spent good, Friends of Jones sponsored this, spent good money on it. I put it out in the parent community just as a link, and I got no comments, nothing. I don't think anybody read it. Or they read it and they didn't want to talk about it because they either agree or disagree, but it's such a hot topic that this document becomes really the foundational piece of how do we move forward to bring the Jones experience into a more welcoming, more unified, more, you know, homogeneous is the wrong word for this, but a more whole experience, because we cannot continue as a school community to be successful with two very distinctive populations. And whether that, you know, how you want to do that, or what maybe Marcia Davis has recommendations on how to work on this, but there's this document, when I read it, it tells me we have a huge need for healing in our community. And we have got to be proactive in addressing it. And it's not just the faculty, it's the whole community. All these people put their time into this, and we have to honor that. So I would encourage you to expand it. It's not widely distributed. It's not widely understood. And people want to know what you as the leader of Jones have to say about it, because nobody's heard anything from you about it either. It didn't turn up in any of the fireside chats. It didn't turn up in the Eagles updates on the weekend, the Friday afternoon update, there's only been silence. And so people look at this and they say, we're hurting. We told them we're hurting and we don't hear anything back. So I would really encourage you to own this, and what are you going to do with it? Let's take this to the next step. And that's really the challenge for the incoming local school council. I see some of our future representatives here, but this is super important for our community and we have to do a better job for this. Can't ignore it.
Thank you. We're not ignoring it.
But it's not just classroom either, it's
I know that.
the community.
I know that.
Rachel? I guess trying to think about like a practical next step, for the June regular meeting. I know Cassie mentioned like maybe we could like, we're already talking about this, so kind of turn into an agenda item now, but, for the June meeting, one of the number one priority in the assessment was to create a strong leadership voice, and then define what is racial equity. And so just like an idea for the June meeting is to kind of, Deborah's mentioning like, kind of discussing it more openly, the assessment in particular, and that was like the number one recommendation of the assessment was related to leadership. And so that's like my suggestion for the June meeting, if we could have a discussion about that.
And I'd like, if I may have the floor, Dr. Powers, I'd like to know if there was something in this report that just, tugged at your heart. Felt like, wow, if you can just let us know, let me know here, like, what was it something in this report that you felt, hey, this is, it just tugs at you. There's something, one or two items that you can just share today.
I think more than anything else, it's the need to have a clear voice on what we're trying to accomplish, and to make sure that that is kept out there. However, we have to back that up with specific steps we're taking. In other words, we can talk in generalized terms, but unless we have specific plans in place, specific actions we're taking. For example, the creation of the two teams that are going to be working together, which are not just faculty teams, they're faculty, student, and members of the school family as well. To use those as leverages for making some of these things happen, and bringing about that level of healing that people are talking about. But I think that's one of the things that struck me the most, was the need to make sure that is out in front and is clearly articulated. And then people see actual steps happening.
I think I'm like curious. I mean, it sounds like after reading it too, like there is a clear voice. I mean, it said that there was like sympathy and empathy towards like the young Republicans of the school as well as towards police officers. So like the clarity of voice is there, at least from like an outsider looking in and like reading this report. And like that voice, like my initial inclination is like it's harmful to the other subset of students who are saying that they don't feel that their voice is heard or that they are protected by administration.
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
There's like a section, I'm trying to find it again, but it talks about how like.
It's the following theme section, and then it's the second bullet point, yeah.
What page?
Fourth. I think.
Somebody read it. Thank you, Will.
Just the bullet point of the whole section.
Just to clarify what, because I don't have it in front of me. I mean, I can't see the screen.
Deep mistrust in the administration's desire and or ability to meaningfully engage in racial equity work. Most interviewees questioned the administration's intentions and named that administration and staff regularly unintentionally reinforce white supremacy culture and biases. For example, administrators ask staff to be mindful of the viewpoints of young Republican students or students who have parents who are police officers, but don't offer similar support for those who experience harm and trauma from those viewpoints.
That could very well be what some people said in their responses.
Was that, sorry, well, was that the summary from the report or was that?
That's, yeah,
That's
it's
from the
part of
report.
a section labeled following themes emerging in page 4.
It's a theme of it.
It's a
So
theme.
for that to be there, it would have to be a theme that came up enough that it was
Presumably several
overly,
times.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to highlight that because that's deeply disturbing to be over here.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with it as a statement. Because a lot of time and effort is spent with addressing the needs of students who do feel in a hard.
Yeah, I think like you don't have to agree with this statement though.
No, I
Because like I
understand
wouldn't
that.
agree with your statement of like
Yes.
telling staff to be mindful of that, but I'm not gonna impose that as like an administrator of a school that has to be mindful of multiple viewpoints
I'm still not
across
following.
the city. That's fine.
I kind of sorry.
think, I guess, just regardless of what you attempt to enforce, there are certain things. It might be, I don't know, for example, this isn't like an example as the racial equity would be, but if you come to school not wearing a mask, that might make a student who is, like, has an autoimmune disorder feel uncomfortable and feel like you aren't going out of your way to protect them, right?
Okay.
So an example per this would be if a member of administration comes to school wearing merchandise that supports like Blue Lives Matter, then that would make a student of color feel uncomfortable. Because even if your goal in that is not to enforce supremacist biases, it does that, it's an action and not a word. So if you wear the hat, even though like you know that it has that connotation, and you're not attempting to enforce that connotation, even if you say you're not enforcing it, it's gonna come off that way because that's what it's doing. I think that like sums it up well enough.
Well, I do think though, we're not talking about a monolithic approach to things. We are a community of well over 2,000 people just within the building itself, not including all the people that the parents, family members, and so forth. And people are going to have varied views, and those views have to be respected, whether somebody doesn't like it or not.
But the theme from this report says that the administration is imposing their views on the staff.
I don't believe that to be true.
This report that pulls from your community says that to be true.
Yes, but I don't believe that to be true. I'm
And
sorry.
that's why I don't care to explain myself,
Yeah.
because like, we're just gonna go back and forth, and you're right, you're gonna be here next year, I'm not. I assumed the goal was understanding that regardless of what you believe, it's important to recognize that a large percentage of the community believes the opposite, and then learning to understand and reevaluate personal beliefs and biases to then also be able to take into account that other perspective.
And I agree with you completely. And I feel that that is something that we strive to do. But we are also striving to meet the needs and respect the viewpoints and the orientation of a wide range of people. And that doesn't mean that we hide, certain things because of some people not feeling that way about it.
I'm still really confused about what we're talking about here. Because what I feel like what this report is trying to say and what is coming out of your mouth is very confusing to me. I'm so sorry. So I think, Violet, what you're trying to say is that, and also what you're trying to say, Alex, is that there is a status quo, right? There's a white supremacy status quo in this culture. Is that something you believe to be true, Dr. Powers, or no?
Depends on how one defines white supremacy status quo, or white supremacy culture.
I think maybe somebody on maybe Bree might be able to explain it better.
Yeah, I mean, white supremacy would be any belief, even if it's unintentional, reinforces racial biases. Once again, if there's a known connotation between like violence within the police and then a disproportionate amount of violence against people of color from the police, even if you are wearing like merchandising supporting the police without that intention, and there's like, but if there's like a known social movement around the fact that there is that disproportionate violence, wearing the merchandise for this, like for the police and being like, I support the police, has developed a connotation of white supremacy, because you're saying, even though people of color are being disproportionately harmed by a group, I support them anyways, and that like makes people uncomfortable.
Daniel?
And I understand what you're talking about, like, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and we are a very diverse school, which I think is amazing, and one of the reasons I chose the school because it's so diverse, but also it's more of like the messaging of, some people just said like, letting students know, like administration said to be mindful of these, but they didn't provide that for other people. And I know, like you said, it's hard to police free speech, like that's touchy and
Right.
everyone's allowed, but just that messaging of we need, like everyone needs to be aware of these opinions, but also not giving that to the other side of like, like, because that's what I'm reading here, just people are feeling like these values are being upheld and these are ignored. And so I would say like, just be mindful of like,
Okay,
of all opinions.
I appreciate it, and I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you.
If I may, there are two things that stuck out to me from this report, and not new. As I came to school in 2019, because it was the same thing that I was hearing when I was sitting as a member of the public from Denaya Boyd, Mr. Slater, is that our students of color, they weren't feeling like they were truly a part of the school, that there was no sense of belonging. Our teachers of color felt that they weren't being supported, that they were being, that their teaching methodologies, their strategies, the way they grade, the way they create their lesson plans were being scrutinized. In this report, right, I know in 2019, some of the things that you have mentioned during the LSC meetings when students or teachers have brought up certain issues of this racial disparity is that sometimes it's anecdotal. If we have data now, we have data from ISB with the SAT scores. We have data from the equal opportunity schools showing that there's an underrepresentation of students of color in some of those AP classes. We have data from the Davis Squared indicating that our teachers of color don't feel like they're being supported, and that our students of color don't feel like they're being supported or belong here. Their narratives, what they have spoken since 2019, and even before that, right? There was a video in 2014, I think, from the students, the Black Students Union, right? Saying the same thing. And now we have data that supports their narrative, their experiences. And so that's what strikes me. It's like we've been talking about this, right? At least since I've been here for 2019, but it seems like it has not changed. Like the culture has not changed significantly. And so I think acknowledging that, recognizing that these are truths, and the data supports their truths. Over, or at least close to 800 individuals completed the survey. Davis Squared had training. And I think one of the questions you asked, like, what is white supremacy, right? How do you define white supremacy? That should have been part of that training. And you should have been able to give us a clear answer of what white supremacy, how white supremacy is defined. And it just bothers me, right? Because I know, and I've heard the students who have spoken before I became a member of this LSC and as a member of this LSC.
Lenny?
Yeah, thanks, Roberto. I think to what Alex is saying, it's a matter of action. You know, because one can have whatever thoughts in your head, but it's a matter of actions. And what it seems like it's been put on students to act a certain way or teachers to enforce a certain behavior. But it does need to, maybe the Culture and Climate Committee will do something to change the culture and climate of the school, but that also, I feel, is going to be an empty path to move forward without a strong leadership voice. I'm talking about you, Dr. Powers. If you don't believe there's a problem with white supremacy culture in this school, then it will never be dismantled. And that's a period right there.
Thank you.
Just add one point. I'm pretty sure this is the third or fourth iteration of a climate and culture like C3 committee at the school in the last, I don't know how many years. And, you know, we saw the equity initiative 4 points rolled out August 2020. And, you know, we've seen this EOS stuff. This is like now like a year and a half into it. And so, you know, I don't know if those committees are really, can even count as concrete steps at this point. And so that is that's just a real thing. And
See what happens. We'll see how effective they are.
so I think Rachel is hoping for more information in June at the regular meeting. Yeah, like some details on those 3 steps would be great. And who are the point people who are going to work on this? Is it all going to be Mr. Mitchell, both those committees again? And some real details to back that up. Rachel?
I just want to make a point. I'm really like uncomfortable with, without looking at data, I'm really uncomfortable with saying like, students of color are down, they're experiencing this. Students of color are down, they're experiencing that. Parents of color, because like, there's no way to like group all of those people together. However, there's data that there is a sharp decline in the enrollment of Black students in the school. And so the reason why we're bringing this up time and time again is not to criticize one person in particular, but is to note trends. And we have a report that has noted the trends. And so, you know, some of us on the council speak to narratives, and I'm speaking to data. The data shows that students of color, particularly Black students, are not comfortable at this school, or they don't want to enroll at this school. What is the plan to address that? We've asked that question multiple times, but I'm just going to ask it one more time because we're not going to be on the council. What is the plan to address that so that you have students who want to apply to this school, so you don't have a reduction of more than half of the enrollment of Black students? Like, why is that happening?
I think we've addressed this before. There's a lot of factors involved in that. The first and foremost being the fact that the selection process for selective enrollment was changed dramatically back more than 10 years ago now, 12 years ago, because it was a race-based selection process. So we did have 25, and actually, I think at one point 26% African-American enrollment in the school, and the white enrollment was capped at 25%. That was the system-wide program. When that changed, and we went over to the tiered system meant that we found ourselves in an imperfect way of determining certainly racial and ethnic composition. Primarily, it was more socioeconomic, but that's an imperfect measure. And during that time period, we saw a steady decline in the enrollment of African-American students. Part of that was also the fact that the selection criteria, the process for doing it, drove the cutoff numbers higher and higher and higher based on demand. And because those cutoff numbers got higher, it left some students behind. And that's something that CPS is working toward, and some of the things that we've tried to do to recruit and to make sure I believe now we've stabilized our enrollment, African-American enrollment around the 10, 11% range, and try to build that up again. And we're building that up through transfers, through principal discretion, through recruitment, through all the things that we are trying to do to get the word out, to share about our school, and to encourage people to apply and to want to. My most recent batch of students applying to transfer are overwhelmingly students of color, 150 students. And surely they want to come here. I can't take all of them, but surely they want to come here, or they wouldn't be applying. And some of them are coming from some pretty significant schools as well. And then you have a final factor, and that is the whole dynamic of school choice has changed within Chicago Public Schools. There was a time 12, 14 years ago when there were not a lot of really strong options for a lot of kids, especially highly academic kids, outside of the selective enrollment schools. But now you have some very outstanding either magnet or neighborhood schools. And I'm thinking specifically, for example, on the south side of Kenwood, of Brooks, of course, becoming a selective enrollment school during that time period, and the strength there. Lynn Bloom, again, selective enrollment, but again, they're closer into communities of color. And a lot of people are making those decisions. For example, every year we have kids who are coming from or who are in the Kenwood or some other school that has an academic, an academy program, 7th and 8th grade academy program, who elect to stay with their school rather than to go someplace else. So there's so many different things, and we have worked extremely hard to get the word out, to recruit, to be, very purposeful about this. And as a result, we are seeing results. We are seeing changes, but it's chipping away. It's chipping away at something that the system itself, the process itself, doesn't support. There's discussion within CPS, for example, and it's been in the media, of eliminating the 30% ranked score at the top of the process and taking the entire 100% of students accepted by the four tiers, 25% each. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not. That's a decision made at the CPS leadership level and at the board level, at the city level. But if that's put into place, that could very well make some significant changes. But it would not be until, if it's going into effect, it'll be for the 2023-24 school year, if it's as soon as that. And that's something that's been a part of discussions for a long time, is that 30% rank, which comes overwhelmingly from tier 4 communities.
Thank you, Rachel, for that question. I think you're pointing to like the overall culture that we live in, which is a white supremacy culture, and that CPS is trying very hard to address that is awesome. But what I'm concerned about as we're increasing our numbers or stabilizing our numbers, I'm concerned about the teachers, the Black teachers who remain here, who have a reported experiences of harm and feel that they are not being supported, as Roberto was mentioning. And I just wanted to say that I feel like if Black teachers and Black students and people of color in this building are taken care of, I feel that everybody is going to be taken care of, including our young women here who do experience, other forms of discrimination and misogyny and harm. We're inviting people of color into a culture of harm if we're not committing ourselves to be a school that wants to address racism and all the disparity in all its forms. And if we are not committed to dismantling white supremacy in all of its terrible forms, then we are just going to continue to have this culture of harm. So I don't know of any more resources that we could, invest in that could help with that. I'm not positive that another $15,000 towards this end is going to do that without just a clear commitment from leadership. And that could be, you talk about simple steps. I mean, just putting it out on the website, saying that you have a commitment towards this end of racial equity and inclusion that will address all of the things that we have talked about here today, including those, English is not first language, including those who have disabilities, including all of those who are more marginalized. But I think what the report is saying, that if people of color in this building are taken care of, then all of us will be taken care of.
I don't disagree with that.
And actions do speak louder than words.
Yes, I understand that.
I just have one comment. So what I'm looking for is really like a real systematic and target approach. As you mentioned, right, our Black African-American student enrollment has decreased in over the 10 years from 25 or roughly around 25% to what is under 12%, right? And I get that the consent decree was lifted, and I get the selective enrollment scores have gotten more and more difficult to get into a selective enrollment school like Jones College Prep. But I think that the principal discretion, this is why I was asking about this disaggregated data. The principal discretion is a very important resource for the school to look at students who didn't meet that cutoff score, to understand where they're coming from, what resources were available to them in their communities that perhaps were barriers to meet those cutoff scores, and inviting them into a beautiful school here, right? The Rolls Royce of selective enrollment schools, as one teacher here is, that's his comment. Looking at the principal report that you provided in December 7, 2021, right? The principal discretion from 2020 to 2022, 49% Caucasian students got entry into Jones through principal discretion versus 17% Black students, 14% Hispanic, 11% Asian. And I think this is, as the school has expanded from 700, roughly around 700 when I think you took over as the leader of the school, to close to 2,000 students, it just strikes me odd that our Black enrollment decreased significantly, but our Caucasian or white student enrollment increased significantly as the school expanded. I have a hard time understanding how does that happen. And I think the principal discretion is a tool to be able to balance that out.
And as is the transfer process.
That's correct, yes.
And the transfer process offers us more latitude because of the numbers that we're able to take. We're pretty well stuck with whatever formula gives us kids coming in through principal discretion. And this year was 23. That's a pretty small percentage of an incoming freshman class. So we're doing what we can to make sure that it is a representative group of kids coming in. And we'll continue to report on those numbers. But again, the big draw is going to have to be how kids are prepared and can meet the qualifications to get in through selective enrollment. And that's outside of our control.
And so I think for June, the truth is, I don't think we ever really saw a plan for hiring and retention. And I think month after month, in terms of faculty, we have the qualitative data of the letter from Black faculty that was sent in December. I don't really feel that we've ever actually even discussed that. And that was a really powerful letter. And I don't think it's gotten any attention. And it's really very concerning. And it's directly related to hiring and retention. And I think recruitment matters, but it also matters what the experience is once you get here. And, just creating some committees, it's not going to be enough. And we'd like to know what those committees are actually planning to do. And I just think the fact that we still have Jones is in its infancy and its equity work on the website right now, I'd like to see that move on to toddlerhood. You know, it's been close to 2 years. So let's push it into another phase of development and not just have a recycling of infancy again. I think that's important. So we'd like to see some, you know, and this is something that I hope the next LLC will continue because I don't see how else it will happen in this school. Okay,
Can I add one thing? We're not going to see it unless the overall structure of how students are selected.
yes,
For
you know what the moment, it's fine. I don't want to cut you off, but we did discuss this.
You do want to cut me off.
Yeah, I
That's
do,
why you
because
didn't
you
let
and
me
I
finish.
discussed this extensively here, but
Yeah,
whatever
I
then.
do want to give Dr. Powers.
No, we.
Never mind. It's
I want to
not,
get
it's
the
not
students'
important.
time. I think they need to go possibly, so.
I have a test tomorrow.
Yeah, but everybody
Yeah.
go. So let's move on to the student report.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't.
No written report. There's just something I want to touch on. A lot of students have been coming to me to talk about this as well. The water bottle refill stations.
Yeah.
A lot of the time are broken,
Okay,
and that's just a big concern for a lot of people.
okay.
So maybe getting that looked into, what's the process with that?
Yeah, anytime we have something that's broken, it needs to be reported to the office so we can then get the
Okay.
engineers to either fix it or get it contracted. Yeah.
Okay, so have students start reporting that to the office?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, okay.
I assumed it was, because every time I've seen it, there's been a sign on it that says like out of order.
Yeah, but somebody may have just put the sign on there and they don't necessarily know, you know. They were doing the obvious, is alerting people it wasn't working. Okay, we'll check on those.
Yeah, I received an email from a student with just some concerns, like logistically. Most of these, I think, were just like a miscommunication or like a misunderstanding on their part that I'll clear up. However, one thing that they did say was that the north cafeteria a lot of the time has been closed during lunch.
Yeah.
So they can't get lunch there, which they said they were fine, like walking. However, it would be appreciated if there was a notice a little bit in advance if that cafeteria isn't going to be open. So maybe in the morning or
Yeah.
10, 20 minutes before lunch.
So that's chiefly because of staffing. We don't have enough people to staff the two cafeterias. And we have made announcements in the morning. Lately, we have not been able to because of testing, but yes, we do.
Last thing on the list is a more recent concern. It's to do with absences with regard to AP tests. A lot of people have absences from AP tests that are still marked as unexcused. Are those automatically corrected by administration to be excused if you get an AP test, or do students need to reach out and get those corrected?
No, those will all be functioned out.
Okay, cool.
There's so many individual students on so many individual time periods, but that's why it's difficult to keep up with, but that'll all get corrected.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Just as graduation is approaching, some students who tend to take more AP classes than younger students are getting a little concerned with the number of
No,
absences.
they don't need to be worried about them being unexcused. They'll be changed.
Okay. Thank you.
And I can tell you that Ms. Brown is working very hard on
Yeah,
that.
she is definitely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's everything.
Thanks.
So next is PPLC. Turn it on our screen.
Kim and I were discussing, in the interest of time, we would be able to take questions if y'all have already looked at the document rather than spending the time reading it. But that being said, if you have not been able to peruse it yet, I will drop the link in the chat. I believe Sarah is sharing it. Thank you. But are there questions for the PPLC?
This is more based on the report from PPLC to administration. Eagle Lab and like those Eagle Lab lessons, are those gonna be coming back, or who's, one of the committees gonna handle that, or Mr. Lopez, where's that fall under?
No, in terms of next school year? Yeah, we're gonna be looking at reviewing what we were doing with regard to use of Eagle Lab time.
Okay.
And how, especially as it pertains to social emotional SEL programming.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Who, like, so you're working, who's gonna take that, like, the full committee and stuff like that?
Right now, person heading that up primarily has been Assistant Principal Torres. But as we create these and get these two new committees, or these committees up and running again, they could very well take a role in that, an additional role in it.
Thank you.
And I think that speaks to the need for structures and clarity with those new committees, because I did not realize that was going to be the purpose of either one of those. And it's not described in the email we received today about the Culture and Climate Committee that would be one of the purviews.
Again, it's such an early stage on that aspect of it. I'm just saying that those are two areas that can contribute in that regard. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be running those programming.
Anyone else with PLC questions? Okay, next is Brenda Jones. Michelle.
First of all, thank you, LSC, for testing out the OWL technology. They were the pilot. And thanks for everyone that's online that like tolerated all the craziness. So in the hopes of continuing to make this accessible, both the Friends of Jones and LSC, Friends of Jones purchased a technology that can be used. So hopefully if you're online and you have issues, feel free to email me and we can work them out. And thank you, Troy, for working through this and helping. So thank you. Raquel is not able to be here today because she told me that I could share this, is that she's in the hospital. She's doing better, but she sends her regrets for not being able to report herself. We had a successful fundraiser. We had 257 tickets about sold, plus a number of sponsors. We're in the process of closing out some of the last expenses to be able to give our final numbers. I guess sometimes there needs to be shipment of some of the auction items and things. And so once we get that done, we'll get our accounting done. So my guess is we might be able to have everything by the 31st meeting. So, and I just am waiting on a signature. One of the people that needed to sign the signature had a death in the family. So I was not able to have that done by tonight either, but that was for one of our other fundraisers. So we are working through learning our process, and I think we're really looking forward next year. As far as our next meeting, we have one on Thursday, and then we have our final one in June where our new slate will be appointed. So watch for details there. We're in the process of getting volunteers for a number of different events, so Prom and others. So if you're wanting to volunteer, feel free to reach out to me or in Raquel's absence. And finally, with the budgeting. So we flipped. We used to do our budgeting over the summer. And last year when I took over, we started to look at it a little differently because we wanted to go into the year with a little bit more rigor around our planning. So we are in our budgeting planning process as well. So what I would ask is if anyone believes that there's a need to go and let us know, because we can bake that into our budget. We always carry over a little bit into from one fiscal year to the next to get us seated until we get the funds raised starting to come in the fall. What we're finding is we're running between 25,000 to 50,000 less than we have on a typical basis, which is not atypical in this world of COVID and people coming back. So we may carry over a little bit more, but knowing if there is a need that could come in the fall or in the summer, we may take a little bit more over. And then if we have excess that goes beyond what our normal seat is, then we'll be looking at how to either gift that to the school and whatever budget or whatever. So if you can, again, let us know what the needs are, that would be great. And then we'll go from there. Yeah.
Do you mean it was a 25 to 50K less expenditures than you normally would have? Or
no, the opposite. We're not taking in as much. Our revenue is down about, we're guessing, we're anticipating now. We may get a big spike in annual fund donations and that will pick it up. But right now, looking at where we're running, I'm estimating that we're going to be between 25 and 50,000 less than what we predicted. That based on historical. We budgeted with a lower number this year, thinking that would happen, and we're coming into about where we thought we were going to be. But if we look traditionally, we would be closer to that higher number. So my guess is it's going to take us a couple of years to get back to that. But our expenses have been down, and we've been able, through some of your guys' work and input as well, have been able, and Dr. Powers be able to find some funding for some other things that we may have in the past supported. So
Anything else? Okay. Thanks, Michelle. So for committee reports, budget, we don't have anything additional. Yeah, is that right? And then I don't think equity and health and safety. Hey, health and safety, did you meet since last meeting?
No, that probably reported last. meeting.
Oh, yeah.
But we
And it was
we
like
are
right
gonna
before.
host, Mr. Lopez at our next meeting on the 23rd, if anybody wants to join us.
So that's May 23rd, 6 p.m.
Yes, it's
Okay. And then Roberta, did you have anything from equity?
No.
Okay, and so date for the June regular meeting, Sarah cannot be here at the regular meeting, so we can move that. I think would be the best thing to do. We still have to go through our.
You don't want to be secretary?
No, and also we have to go through our closed minutes and closed recordings. And so,
Or what do
yeah,
you?
so that's just, we need a secretary there for that. So that's just, basically ask if they're,
For every 6 months, you're supposed to go and look at all your closed session recordings, decide if you're keeping them or they can be deleted. Most councils don't do this. It's kind of important to do.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say most
And
councils.
the meeting minutes already exist.
They're very brief.
Yes, but they exist.
Yeah.
So when you want to have the meeting?
I beg your pardon, are we thinking of changing the date for the June meeting?
yes.
No, that was.
That's also final.
Oh,
okay.
Well, a little bit. The regular meeting is before, it's scheduled for the 7th or something. And so that's before the 10th, which means it was done before the 10th, but that is not realistic to do it on the 7th, that we do the 7th date.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding, I can't hear what you're saying.
So we need to move that June regular meeting because Sarah is not available on that day. So we need to do it at some other date.
Before the 10th.
It doesn't have to be before the
Oh,
10th now though, because we scheduled the 31st. So the
Okay.
31st will take care of any kind of
It's
issues.
still
So we have,
earlier in
you
June.
know,
Do we need to do that now, or could we send out like a poll with just a bunch of different dates and?
I
vote?
think so, because we can move a regular meeting without like a vote or whatever. So yeah, we could do a doodle poll for it for that. Yeah, maybe makes sense, because things might be pretty, I mean, you and Will are not going to, so you should not answer. Last one, it could be, but I made that yes. Yeah. Another special meeting. Yeah, unless we schedule it for the 5th, but I don't think nothing's gonna make it cut for the 5th, so, yes. Okay, so, and then agenda items, we've already talked about that. Public participation has been really quiet this evening, and so not seeing any further items, I will adjourn.
I will say, I think this is gonna be my last meeting, so I know I got really spicy today, I'm so sorry. But, I mean, Jones will always be part of my family, my mom graduated from here, like, it will always have a special place in my heart. Yeah, I mean, it's been like really great, especially Daniel, like getting to know you via Zoom. But, yeah, thanks for having me in your community, I really appreciate it, I learned a lot. That's it.
Okay.